Alma looks straight ahead, completely focused, and loudly utters the fireball spell. He sharply thrust his hands forward, and a huge fiery beam shot across the field. The blast wave rushes and crashes right into the very center of the target with a powerful explosion. Alma looks around, smoke rises from the target, and his maid begins to shout joyfully, telling him he was wonderful. She cannot get enough how impressed she is that a boy his age can use magic with such precision. And the maid even jumps up with excitement, exclaiming that he is the first true prodigy in their family. Alma just stands and feels a bit embarrassed, telling her that she clearly overdid the praise. She does not tolerate this, immediately asks him if he really thinks she is exaggerating. She notices that the power and accuracy of that last spell were on a completely different level, especially since he has not even received his official gift yet, so almost no one notices his natural talent. Alma lowers his gaze, thinking about that special gift. He should eventually receive it. No. They knew that at 15 the goddess gives everyone a special ability, and combat types are the most valuable of all. Suddenly, right next to him, a huge pillar of energy struck the ground. The shockwave was so strong that Alma had to cover her face, and the maidlet let out a short scream. He almost froze in front of the display, instantly realizing that he was looking at high-level lightning magic, and he says that with that person, you can never guess where the attack will hit. Alma calls her older brother Keith, who appears full of confidence. Keith glanced and told Alma what he saw. She is still training here, as always, putting all her strength into it. The maidlet got excited again, exclaiming that this is exactly what she expects from the most talented family member. She never tires of praising his magical gift of purple lightning, saying that even the guards consider him a true ace. Alma praises her brother, saying that he is doing exactly what everyone expected of him, especially since he has already handled those powerful gifts so well. Alma asks what he wants from him. He says he is surprised. Keith even came all the way here just to talk. Keith freezes for a moment, as if suddenly remembering something, and he tells Alma that their father actually has a little time now to see him. Alma is clearly shocked when Keith adds that this meeting is actually only for his own good. Later that night, the two of them sit down for a quiet, elegant dinner in the main hall. The father breaks away from his food, raises his head, and asks if it is true that the ceremony is tomorrow. He barely stops eating for a second and confirms that it is then that he is to receive his gift. He just looks at the plate, and quietly reckless tension of the big day is finally taking its toll. Lord Fellows said he tried to persuade Kuraha and Keith to join, but they didn't even want to listen. He quickly waved it off and said it was all right. They are both cool at their craft and always busy. The atmosphere at the table changed, looks at Alma, and admits that he is actually quite nervous. He begins to wonder aloud whether Alma will really receive a gift truly worthy of their surname. After a moment, he wipes his mouth with a napkin and decides to honestly say what he expects. He looks directly at Alma and says he sincerely hopes that this child will take on his title of sage. Alma just stares back, completely stunned. The burden of the title of sage suddenly fell upon him. This is a real sensation. His father is a legendary sage, and his mother is a sorceress of the highest level, so everyone expects that the children of their lineage will finally receive some insanely powerful magical gift. Even the eldest brother Kurek has already become famous. He is known as the famous sorcerer of the Red Lotus. And there is also the second son, Kit, who is already called the Purple Sorcerer of Lightning, who does this to make it clear to everyone in this family has their own gift connected with a certain type of magic. Both older brothers have the highest level magical gifts that make them special, and you. But there is one gift that is completely unlike the others. It is on a completely different level. The gift of the sage is the most powerful thing a sorcerer can have. With it, all kinds of magic open up before him. This is exactly how Alma's father single-handedly made the family's name so quickly. The thought that there will be two sages in a row in the family is huge, and Alma really feels it. How it presses on the heart when Dad says he has been watching him closely for a long time and has huge expectations. He confidently tells Alma, whatever the gift may be, it will still become an important part of the family. But the real shock hits when he says that he has freed the whole day for himself to watch the ceremony tomorrow. Alma wipes her eyes with her sleeve, completely moved by her father's words, thinking about how lucky he is, and he repeats to himself that he will give everything he has. Finally, the day of the ceremony has come in this huge temple. The whole place is bursting with people. Alma tells herself that it is okay if he does not become a sage, and even if his gift seems small or unimportant, he is still ready to accept it. The priest stands by the altar like Alma looks into the distance with a serious face and silently promises to repay her family for everything they have done for him, starting now. Suddenly the priest shouted Alma's name across the room. This is how the announcement officially began, while his father looks from the crowd with an incredibly tense gaze. Alma's thoughts are completely occupied by his father and the rest of that man's family, holding their breath, waits for the big reveal. The priest lowers his gaze to the results and begins to precisely say what Alma's gift is, but for a moment falls silent, leaving everyone. He seems to have frozen there with his eyes closed, just waiting for his fate to be announced. The priest looks down at the results. He is completely speechless and utterly bewildered by what he sees. He looks at the crowd and wonders how such a thing could have happened at all, while the silence stretches on. The crowd begins to whisper. The atmosphere becomes strange, so Alma's father shouts loudly, asking the priest why he is so embarrassed. His father exclaims that he wants to know the result, and the priest stammers in his speech and finally admits that Alma has no gift. His father just stands there, frozen with an empty gaze. He is so shocked that he cannot utter a single word. Alma looks around. Reality bursts into the room. The heir of that family had no gift, leaving him standing there with wide-open eyes, completely stunned by the news that he is actually powerless. He knows that not having a gift is almost unthinkable and cannot understand why it is happening to him. The crowd began to mockingly whisper and shout, saying the son of the sage is such a great disappointment, and the pressure was so intense that Alma could barely breathe. The word incompetent spins in his head as he walks away, and the whole situation seems unbearably painful. Alma stands with a look of complete disbelief on his face. He says there must be some mistake because the rules are simple. Every person must receive a gift, and then the priest and Lord Fellows begin to leave. His father says that this is completely unheard of, but he seems somewhat certain about something. Alma watches him leave and wonders if his father is really trying to take care of him. He fixates on the word effort, repeating to himself that he will work as soon as he can, giving all his strength. He remembers how his father told him how much he hoped that Alma himself would accept his title of sage. He tries to stay positive, believes that all his training still matters, looks at his father and says he will do everything not to let him down, but Lord Fellows just walks on, says he has been watching Alma since childhood and is sure he will become a great support for the family, and this makes Alma call him again, hoping that his father still cares about him despite what happened during the ceremony. But then his father's face instantly twisted with disgust. He suddenly exploded and threw at Alma, "Never call me father again." He walks on without looking back and throws at Alma, "Haven't you realized yet what terrible trouble I got into?" The crowd goes wild, shouting that this cannot be, and Alma just stands and understands. Whatever that gift was, he is seriously in trouble because Lord Fellows looks like he is about to explode. He moves his hand aside, looking at his son only with disgust, and Alma stands alone before the large stone-arched entrance, completely stunned, watching everyone turn away from him while his father says a bad gift is one thing, but having no gift at all is a real disaster, and people in the crowd whisper that the third son is a complete failure. They begin to guess whether something is wrong with their family blood. The crowd noise grows, and someone asks if he even hears all the filth being said about him. Some say he left and stained the family name, while others just shrug. They say he is just a spoiled rich boy who never had real talent, and they keep telling him shame, and tears gather in Alma's eyes as he listens to everyone tearing him apart. Then Lord Fellows shouts loudly for everyone to hear. The Fellows family does not need such a clumsy boy who can't even get a single gift. He says Alma's name one last time, and with that puts a full stop. He tells him he is banishing him from the family forever, leaving everything. Later, barely holding himself on a chair in the tavern, he looks beaten and out of sorts, leaning over a glass and exhaling a long sigh, trying to understand that his life is ruined. Alma hears people whispering nearby that it was the family of that famous man they just saw, and he understands. The news that he was expelled has already spread everywhere. He takes a sip, and the worker notes that a pint costs 700 gold, which might. This makes him remember the 50,000 gold the family gave him when they expelled him, and he knows for sure, such a place is not a home for a naive person like him. He slams his hand on the table and tells himself he can't just keep drinking like this. He is in despair. He almost stands up but immediately starts worrying. How will he survive on his own at all? When the stress finally takes over, he simply falls to the floor. He lies there completely exhausted, staring into the void because this is F. Finally, it dawns on him that he is completely alone. He looks up at the ceiling and realizes that in the whole world he no longer has a single ally, and since he no longer has either a surname or a gift, and it seems to him that no one will ever look his way again. Alma lies on the floor completely exhausted. He just looks up and mumbles that everything is one big pile of crap. He begins to wonder if he was really lucky to see what will happen next, laughing about it being his so-called gift when the man. And suddenly, out of nowhere, a message appears. It says that his Reincarnator gift has finally been activated. Alma's eye opened wide when he saw the screen. He was deeply shocked and could not comprehend what was happening. He sits up and asks what the voice in his head is, and just at that moment, the system says that he is about to regain all memories and powers from past lives. He begins to doubt everything, what kind of gift this is and what Reincarnator even means, but suddenly his status begins to update, grabs his head and starts losing his mind from the pain, while the system confirms that the transfer was successful. Some guy sitting nearby looked at him and asked what the hell was wrong with him, telling Alma that he was clearly exaggerating because of the pain. But the system does not stop. Another message appears. He has officially inherited offensive magic, and then it just continues. A bunch of notifications flooded and overwhelmed his vision, confirming that he now has ready defense, recovery, support, and even space and time magic. System notifications pour incessantly. Space magic, spirit magic, and even forbidden magic all successfully inherited, and Alma screams in pain as his old memories finally lock into place. He gasps and begins to understand the truth. Finally, everything falls into place. Why at the official ceremony he did not receive a new gift because honestly he did not need any. He realizes that the true power was always within him, but before he can realize this, a huge hand reaches out and grabs him by the face, and he just watches. Alma looks completely stunned as some man loses self-control, shouts, and demands to know what the hell he thinks he is doing. Alma just looked back calmly and asked, "What happened?" While meanwhile that man pointed and loudly declared, "That's definitely Alma. She is behind all this. Look." Looking around the room, you see complete chaos. Every person in the tavern is bent over their drink or lying face down on the floor, except for one man in armor who is barely standing. Alma understands this is the pressure of his own magic now that he has inherited the power of his previous life. It is seeping everywhere. It turns out everyone nearby who is not strong enough to withstand such raw energy is simply completely suppressed by the presence of the Reincarnator, leaving. The man in armor trembled like a leaf, barely standing on his feet, and tried to ask what Alma really did to everyone. The armored guy is completely losing it, grabbing at the air and gasping, asks Alma, "What the hell am I really?" And Alma just stands there looking very awkward about all this. The guy says that somehow he managed to knock out every person in this room. He is drenched in sweat and glances at Alma, but Alma just raises a hand and nervously tells him that this is probably just a big misunderstanding right now. That guy categorically disagrees and says there is absolutely no point in arguing further. So he lunges forward suddenly. Alma's eyes widen. He realizes he must move lightning fast to avoid the blow. Alma leans back, dodging the attack amid the tavern chaos, and at the same time the truth about his gift, the Reincarnator, begins to dawn on him. The armored one swung relentlessly, putting all his strength into the blows, but the narrator says that this gift is exactly what Alma received in his first life. Turned out that the one who holds the Reincarnator gift can use it only once for a single reincarnation. When this person turns 15, all memories and skills from the past life will flood in at once, and even now dark energy begins to swirl around Alma's hands. Alma looks into the opponent's eyes, and at that moment his true power finally awakens, the legendary dark magic that has been with him all this time. Alma focuses his energy and quietly whispers the word hollow as his hand extends, summoning a colossal skeleton of black smoke loomed over the guy. While people in the room just stand, catching their breath, Alma thinks about how he chose to be strong in his first life and honed those skills throughout his entire second life until they became perfect, which led to the moment he realized he finally had all the magic he would ever need for the tavern, where everyone is now lying on the floor. Looking at his hand, he understands from here his new life truly begins. The next morning, rumors spread through the city that the son of that man was spotted in the tavern. But the guards are mostly confused. They say everyone inside was found knocked out and no one knows how it happened. One of the guys in armor lifted his head to the tall buildings nearby and wondered if it would be the perfect place for someone to hide. The guards patrol the streets and one of them says to his partner, "Relax, you're taking the search too seriously." But that guy reminds him a fat gold reward awaits from that family if they really find the child, which Alma hears hiding in the shadow of the neighboring alley. He quickly realizes that the mess he made in the tavern has already spread to all corners. Standing on the roof, Alma bitterly thinks that he was kicked out anyway, so he definitely cannot stay in the Empire and must find a new place to go. It is then that he suddenly remembers that the Kingdom of Familia is just west of the place where he is now, so he thinks about that place, a mighty monarchy that has stood for over 200 years and is as great as the Empire. He even remembers, in a past life he had a refuge there, but whether it still stands after 2 centuries unknown. Like a blow, it dawns on him that 200 years have passed since he was last here. And he suddenly realizes this whole Illistella Empire did not even exist when he was first alive. Alma looks into the distance with a smile, thinking that he is actually eagerly waiting to see how much the world has changed in these 200 years. Guards continue to patrol, and Alma recalls that on Carriage Street there once was a trade cart that went west, so he jumped into a dark alley to hide from prying eyes. Still quite early, the streets are empty, so he decides not to stop to keep going while everything is quiet. He almost froze when he saw a familiar face. It was his brother Keith, who calls him a fool and says he was waiting just for him. Keith stands right in the middle of the street, completely blocking the way forward. He again recalls the tavern fight and tells Alma that even after exile he is still a disgrace to the family. Keith begins charging lightning in his palms, and while sparks twitch, he says that their dad got terribly angry because of the mess he made. But Alma tries to persuade him to wait at least a second. He sincerely told his brother that the story in the tavern was just an accident and a big misunderstanding, because he absolutely does not want to fight with his relatives. Alma tries to stay calm, says that he will just leave the Empire without making a scene, but Kit disagrees. He tells Alma that he hasn't changed at all, and this takes her by surprise. Kit admits he doesn't care at all about what happened in the tavern, and with a crazy expression on his face, he tells Alma that he would just like to beat him to death right here. Alma can't believe her ears. His own brother says such things. He just stands there completely stunned, as if Kit begins to gather magic and says that he actually always hated him. Kit loses his temper, calls him an incompetent freak, and shouts for him to die while he throws a huge burst of energy straight at Alma. But Alma stays calm, recognizing the move as a lightning bullet, and although it is just a simple spell, he knows true power depends on who uses it. Keith feels on top of the world, imagining his title, the Purple Lightning Sorcerer, and that no one dares to mess with him, so and then he releases a huge explosion that lights up the entire street. He looks very smug. Keith thinks he has finally finished, but when the smoke cleared, a giant stone slab stood in the middle of the road. It turned out that Alma had summoned earth magic at the last moment and raised a stone shield. Keith completely loses his head and does not calm down. How could that guy even know how to use earth spells? Alma remains calm and tells him that he has been secretly training for some time. That this terribly annoys Keith. Earth magic has a huge advantage over his lightning, and he keeps asking when it all started. Keith begins to panic, saying that he is already tired of how Alma always behaves like that, and he keeps grumbling that his younger brother always has better results. Keith vents his frustration, how he hates being compared to his younger brother. He says it makes him sick. Alma silently listens as Kit tells about the moment he found out that Alma did not receive a special gift from the gods. Kit starts laughing like a real psycho, admitting that learning about his brother's failure gave him incredible pleasure. He begins to gather energy and says that the family name will be disgraced if a loser like Alma is allowed to live. With a terrifying expression on his face, Kit tells the boy that he will finish him off right here and now. Alma recognizes the spell that Kit is about to use, and anxiety grips her. There are still people nearby. But Kit is not worried at all. He shouts that if necessary, he will break through several passers-by to win. He raises his hand and shouts the name of his lightning magic, El Regan, letting the power accumulate. Alma understands that this thunder spear must pierce right through his earthly shield, and he truly begins to panic. If even one of those arrows misses, innocent people on the street will be blown apart. It has a wild look in his eyes as he shouts for Alma to burn to ashes, and he releases a massive lightning discharge. A huge explosion throws stones in all directions. From a huge crater in the middle of the street, blue-gray smoke begins to rise. It just snorts mockingly at the ruins, convinced that he has already won the battle, but when he looked closer, he realized his brother had completely disappeared from the place he had just blown up. Keith starts losing his temper, shouting and asking where the hell that boy is hiding, and he runs his gaze furiously over the rooftops but sees him nowhere. Suddenly, Alma appears behind the crowd. He had safely sneaked in and pushed everyone aside. Without a word, he used a teleportation spell to take everyone to safety, and Kit didn't even notice how he moved. But saving so many people at once without saying a word is really starting to exhaust him. Alma looks at the smoking crater and thinks to himself that his brother Kit is really quite impressive, but he knows he will no longer allow innocent people to get into this mess. Kit is sweating and looking around wildly like a madman, and Alma whispers to him, "I'm sorry, but I have to take him down now." Alma just stands arms folded, preparing to cast a spell. Meanwhile, Kit is still standing in the middle of the street, surrounded by lightning and shouting for Alma to show his face. Alma looks at him and admits that the lightning magic of his brother is undoubtedly powerful. Although Kit puts on a loud show of strength, a huge gap has opened before him. Alma simply appears behind him and, as if in passing, says that he is standing right there. Keith turns sharply, completely shocked, and asks when, damn it, that guy got behind his back, but Alma does not answer him. He just tells Kit that now it is his turn to attack. Kit calls Alma an idiot and says there is no point in calling if he is going to make a sudden attack. But Alma simply replies from the roof that he just told him where he was, because for him the fight is already over. Keith raises his eyes in complete shock, barely able to utter a word when Alma activates his earth magic. The ground completely crumbles. He activates a move called Stone Prison, and giant stone pillars burst out from under the ground to trap Keith inside. It realizes that he is completely cornered, only stone walls around. He begins to lose control. Alma shouts for her not to look down on him, trying to break free. Alma doesn't even blink. He simply adds lightning to his magic and uses a press lock. Huge stones slam shut with a rumble and crush everything inside. The cat is completely stuck in the stone prison and is going crazy because he can't believe that Alma can use lightning magic too. Alma just looks at him and asks if he noticed what is really happening because it turned out that the cat himself magnetized all the minerals underground earlier with his powerful lightning strike. Alma explains that he simply powers his earth magic with his own lightning, so this trap cannot be broken. Alma picks up the boy he saved and carries him to a safe place while his brother remains stuck. The elderly villagers are endlessly grateful. They tell Alma that he is a true savior and thank him again and again. But Alma lowers his gaze, tormented by guilt, and repents, thinking that the whole quarrel is because of him. The villagers won't let him torment himself. They tell him to lift his head. They reminded him that no matter how it started, the truth is that he was the one who stepped forward and saved them. Alma senses them and finally lets out a barely noticeable smile, quietly thanks them as the tension slowly dissipates. Keith begins to go insane in his stone prison, raising his voice and shouting at Alma, "Tell me what is going on here." He persistently demands to know when Alma even received so much magic, and asks if all this time he was hiding his true power from everyone. It plunges into an abyss of thoughts. He thinks about how he let his father down and did not live up to the title of sage, then shouts at Alma for looking down on him. He keeps scolding him, demanding an answer, while Alma just stands there looking completely broken. You almost start to remember how they were younger. Kit then loved to boast about his lightning magic and explain that it was not just for fighting, it could really move and rearrange objects. Back then, Alma was truly fascinated by him, thinking that they were just two brothers who worked hard and competed a little friendly. Looking at Kit's face now, it is immediately clear his brother feels completely broken. When everything around changes, Alma makes a big decision. He leaves the Empire and heads east to escape the continent forever. Alma begs Kit please don't follow him and immediately adds that he is actually heading west. He closes his eyes and thinks that he never wants to see that mighty lightning magic of his brother again. Inside, the cat loses his head and shouts at the top of his voice that since Alma said west, he must go east. Keith constantly shouts that Alma is an idiot and that he will track him down and defeat him wherever he runs doing. Taking Alma's smile, he thinks how simple his brother is while he waves and says, "Take care of yourself." Alma walks away, becoming a tiny figure in the distance, and everyone else just freezes in place. One of the boys, stunned, simply says, "Alma really left." The scene shifts to a quiet corner of the city, where the shopkeeper is just passing time by his stall and Alma stands by the horse-drawn carriage with his gear finally ready to set off. The driver shows the way out of the city, and Alma prepares to leave his old life behind. He almost settles on the back bench of the horse carriage as it sets off, leaning back while he was looking around the carriage salon, he mentally repeated, "This is the first time I am riding so far in a carriage." Opposite him sits a girl with a ribbon headband. She seems completely focused and has. When Alma only notices her face out of the corner of his eye, he suddenly realizes that he has definitely seen her before in the square. He feels a little embarrassed because of this coincidence, especially when he notices that she is just intently looking at him, and he begins to wonder if she is really looking at him for a reason. Suddenly, a voice from outside the carriage asks for a moment of their time, catching D. The driver's attention is instantly drawn by several armored guards who appear to explain that a dangerous wizard is supposedly hiding in these parts. The chief guard says directly without unnecessary words, he needs to find out exactly who is on board here. Alma and the girl lean forward to see what all the fuss is about when the guards begin the inspection. The guard starts the check, approaches the man in the vest, and asks if he has any documents with him. The man introduced himself as Tristan from the Western Farms and said that the woman next to him is his wife, and meanwhile, well, he almost panics because he has no documents and even thinks about using teleportation to escape. Before the guard turns his gaze to the back of the carriage and asks the children to tell their story. Alma is about to burst out when suddenly someone shouted to him, "Brother." This is the girl with the ribbon. She leans right in front of him and takes control of the situation. She raises a card and says to the guard, "My name is Luna, I am from the territory of Western Flanders." And then she points directly at Alma and says that he is just her younger brother. The guard inspects them and Alma stands there, sweating and hoping the lie will work. Alma realizes that she is actually pulling him out of trouble, probably thanking him for helping her earlier in the square. The guard finished the check and told everyone they could proceed. The carriage moves, finally departing from the castle gates and leaving the city behind. When they are safe, Alma turns to Luna and says, "You really saved him back then." And then he truly introduced himself, Alma, adding that he had seen her earlier in the square. Luna is a bit shy and quietly mumbles an apology for what happened between them earlier. Alma just sighed deeply and admitted that the whole incident made him terribly nervous. Then it got even stranger. Glowing squares and lines began to hover around him. And Luna just stares straight ahead, and a burning gaze suddenly flared in her eyes. Alma caught a barely audible whisper from her, as if she whispered teleport. He understands that she is definitely mumbling something under her breath, right before everything changes. Luna begins to mutter to herself, completely stunned by how someone managed to cast high-level cosmic magic on an entire group at once without uttering a single spell. And she never tires of talking about the wide arsenal of spells and the insanely good intuition that was needed for this. Lost in thought, she wonders what it would mean if this person. Chariot rumbles into a pothole and she suddenly exclaims, "Alma." Luna turned to him with a serious look and said she had a request for him. Alma is not shocked at all and simply tells her that he actually expected her to say something, but he still repeats the word favor in response, a bit uncertainly waiting for her to continue. Luna looks him straight in the eyes, more determined than ever, and says his name once again. She does not beat around the bush. She directly tells him that she wants him to come back with her to her territory. Alma looks quite embarrassed by the sudden invitation and asks her why she invited him specifically. Luna just looks at the floor and begins to explain that it is because of something very important. Luna looks him straight in the eyes and frankly says that she has a task that only a person with his special skills can handle. The puzzle pieces almost come together. He says that now it is clear why she went all out to save him from those guards earlier. This comment caught Luna by surprise and they both stood looking at each other in complete confusion. She panics a little, waving her hands, and swears that she did not want that job to be some kind of exchange for helping him. Alma could not shake the feeling that asking for this right now was clearly a bit unfair. Especially when Luna, blushing to her ears, looks at the floor and mumbles that she actually just wanted to repay him for what he did for her. He really finds it funny, so he starts laughing until she asks what is so funny here, although deep down he has already decided that he will help her. But he has to consider that people are chasing him. If those pursuers catch up with him, they will bring a lot of trouble to Luna's doorstep. She seems to sense his hesitation, looks down a little sadly, and admits that the invitation came out quite suddenly. She gently makes it clear he does not need to rush if he has other matters first. Let him go and take care of them. He sits almost silently in the carriage and thinks that finally something has been found that he really wants to do. This reminds him how in a past life he decided to train to madness and master magic, only to be happy this time. Looking back, he realized he never knew what to do with all that power. So he decides to simply ask Luna, what does happiness really mean to her? Luna looks a bit puzzled at the sudden question and asks why he is bringing it up out of nowhere. Alma tells her that it is just for reference, and she freezes for a second, thinking. When she finally answered and said that it is family, Alma could not hide her complete surprise at such a simple answer. She continues to tell how much she likes the people at home, in Flanders, and sincerely admits that her greatest hope is simply to always see friends and relatives happy. Then she looks at him and asks if that answers his question, and he freezes a little at how clear her goals are. Alma thinks about what she said, repeats that she is happy when her family is happy, and he tells her that it is truly a wonderful way to live. Suddenly, Tristan from the other end of the carriage intervenes and says he knows Alma had a hard time because of his older brother. For a moment they froze in surprise, so Tristan apologized and explained that he could not help overhearing their conversation. A serious expression appears on his face. He admits that he does not know every detail of what happened, but he finally just goes out and asks if it is true that Alma was actually kicked out of his own home. The carriage fell silent, and Tristan aloud asks if this whole journey is just a way for Alma to take revenge. Alma looks down at his hands, clenches them tightly, and admits that he is truly disappointed with how everything turned out. He says, although he was betrayed and had everything he worked on taken away, something still restrains him. Because he absolutely does not want to hurt the place where he grew up or the people who live there, no matter what happens. Luna just looks at him with a gentle smile, as if saying she always knew because he is far too kind. Alma lowers his eyes, admitting that he simply lacks the courage to carry out something like revenge, so he apologizes to Luna, says he needs some time to process her request, and asks if she will give him one night on TH. Let him think it over. Luna says she understands and asks him to just say tomorrow what he decides while the carriage rolls on. Alma looked at her and sincerely thanked her for her patience, and meanwhile, while they sit there, he confidently promises that by the next morning he will definitely give her a final answer. Meanwhile, at the estate, Kid is going crazy and loudly calling for his father. He is trembling with rage and demands that his father finally give him permission to go out and deal with Alma. But at that very moment, a maid enters the room to report the situation to him, and she tells him that the Lord himself ordered Alma to be sent back home, and Keith was simply stunned by this. Everything changed as soon as rumors spread. In their fight, Keith actually lost to Alma. Lord Fellow sits in his library and contemplates how insanely high Alma's power level could actually raise the family's reputation, even if the child has no gift, and in the hall, Kid is completely losing his mind, clenching his fists so hard they tremble. Just repeat. He kept muttering to himself how this whole situation is complete garbage. He realizes if Alma really returns home, everything will go back to how it was, or even worse for him, so he looks back at the maid with a grim expression and begins to weave a lie, saying he is heading east, but then he stopped, gave her a clear message, and insisted, make sure father hears exactly what I have to say. Today, Keith tells her to report that Alma is heading west toward the familiar's territory, and the maid just nods and says she understands. Keith stands, sweating, completely tense. The reality of the situation begins to sink in for him, because he knows that he has just crossed an important line, officially conspiring against his own father. He thinks about the mess in his plan, but rejoices. Now only he knows that Alma is actually heading east. Keith clenches his fist near his chest and thinks to himself that there is no turning back after the choice he has just made, and he flashed a rather dark smile, thinking about how he will make Alma pay for all the humiliations he has felt lately. He walks down the corridor and laughs like a true villain, unaware that his fake report turned out to be 100% accurate regarding Alma's route. So the family pursuer finally follows Alma's trail to the west, just as Keith said. But because Keith is convinced he lied, he sets off alone to wander east in search of a brother who is nowhere near there. In a moment, events move forward and attention shifts away from the family drama because Alma is already heading to the next major stop of her journey, a place called Talistella. It is a huge trading city. The streets buzz, and rows of stalls and tents stretch as far as the eye can see. And as soon as he steps inside, Alma places a pile of coins on the counter to pay for a place to stay overnight. The man behind the counter tells him that everything is ready, a room at the end of the corridor for one night. Alma stands in his new room and thinks bitterly. He just gave the innkeeper 2,000 gold and he has about 1,000 left. He finally realized, after abandoning the empire, stopping here in the trading city of Talistella was essentially his only way out. Anxiety overwhelms him. If he doesn't find a way to earn money quickly, his entire journey will reach a dead end. But the problem is that if his family has already given up looking for the boys, he simply cannot afford to waste time on long adventures. Almost stands by the window and thinks, maybe just find some dungeon and dive into it. But he immediately rejects this idea. A dungeon with such treasures definitely could not be nearby. When he says the word treasure aloud, a click suddenly happens in his head. A memory from a past life surfaces. He raises his hand, things begin to change, and he focuses all his energy, activates spatial magic, and loudly shouts the skill item box. Above his palm, a black cube seems to appear out of thin air, and next to it, a digital menu with a welcome message begins to load. He looks into the newly opened dimensional storage, his heart pounding ready to see what is hidden there. Alma watches intently as his storage reacts to his mana. The size of the box actually depends on the user's magical power, so for each. He checks the contents and sighs with relief. It turns out everything from his old life has arrived here intact and unharmed. In his previous life, he always reached for this box of things when everything went awry, but he never expected it to come in handy right now. A pile of monster materials and rare parts is scattered across the bed, making everything. Alma is sure that by selling some of this, he will solve all his money problems forever, but as soon as he scrolling through the list further, he begins to realize that he might have a small problem. Some things here are just too crazy. The inventory is packed full of legendary weapons like the Dragon God's sword and the Sea God's spear, and he knows well if even one thing gets out, it will cause a complete disaster. So he chooses one particular item, hoping that showing it here won't be a big problem. He convinces himself that it's just an ordinary monster hunting material, so it should be safe, but suddenly and a doubt arises. What if it's so rare that no one in the whole city even knows how to appraise it? Alma decides, why not try, looking at the monster part in his hand, and he decided to just stop by the local guild tomorrow morning as soon as it opens. He pauses for a moment by the window, watching the sun slowly set and birds flying past the nearby buildings. Next to Luna, she is just lying in bed, looking at the ceiling and in her head a bunch of thoughts. She whispered to herself under her breath, tomorrow, clearly thinking about what the next day will bring. The next morning, the Adventurers Guild of Talistella is already bustling and lively. People are gathering, trading, and taking quests. Alma enters and immediately notices how crowded it is here. No wonder. This town is a big crossroads for people from different countries. He is frantically looking for where to buy materials, but so confused that he bumped right into someone. A huge monster's head with a loud crash fell to the floor, and Alma instantly began apologizing for the mess. The traveler who was hit groans on the ground, and Alma keeps apologizing, realizing she just knocked a person down and dropped his loot. After the collision, Alma looks very worried and asks the boy if he is okay. The traveler just laughs, sweating under the weight of his trophy, and says that he has to apologize. His heavy burden blocked the view of the child. Looking at the boy, Alma notices that he seems about his age and is dressed in some simple, cheap clothes that immediately reveal him as a complete novice who just received his gift. He notices a fresh scratch on the boy's face and involuntarily wonders if he got it in a fight with some monster. Then Alma bowed his head and apologized for having dirtied the boy's monster materials on the floor. He waved his hand and calmly said that everything was fine. The boar he hunted was an old and fierce beast anyway. He introduces himself as Raul, a traveler, sincerely smiling, while at the same time says that Alma is clearly not from this part of the city. Alma introduces himself and sincerely explains he is just looking for a place to sell some monster materials he carries. Raul raises his thumb and says he is heading to the same place, offering to show the boy the way. Walking, Raul cannot believe his ears. Alma came all the way from Alistella and admits that he really ran out of money on the trip. Raul looks a little tired from carrying his catch and asks if this is really Alma's first visit to the guild, and then he casually asks, is Alma really going to register and become a full-time adventurer? He seems a little embarrassed by how Raul asked that, but quickly explains he did not come to join the guild. He decided just to sell his materials for quick money and immediately head to familiar territory, thinking that. He says that it is a good idea, but then notices that Raul is clearly nervous and immediately asks if something is wrong. Raul tries to act naturally and explains that this guild is too overcrowded for its size, which has created a real mess in the hierarchy among the members, which has recently caused Raul a lot of problems. Raul honestly says if Alma really wanted to join, he would try with all his might to talk him out of it, and this makes Alma realize that Raul is actually quite a nice guy. Suddenly, the older boy looks around and notices Alma looks a bit battered. He assumes that the boy got quite a beating from the boar he is dragging behind him, and then points out that Alma has bruises all over his body, and the boy only makes a nervous sound. Raul just laughs, says that these bruises are by no means from hunting, and he himself does not really know how to explain it. Moving forward, Raul notices their goal and points to the receptionist waiting behind the counter. The woman at the desk raised her head and asked in a lively voice if they came to sell any materials from monsters. She is reserved and asks Alma if he has his official guild identification with him. Turns out the guild buys only from registered members, so Raul looks quite awkward in the background. The receptionist says they can inspect his belongings today, but only if he completes the registration first. Alma realizes that he really doesn't want to get involved with all that adventurous social ladder and all that irritating dramatism, but it begins to seem to him that there is almost no choice. Just at that moment, Raul touches his shoulder too. To get his attention, winking, he told the receptionist that he would just lend the boy his registration card for the exchange. He tries to appear calm, telling Alma that he can simply sell the monster parts under his own name. After all, the woman at the desk can't possibly remember every face that comes in. But Alma just looks at him with an uncertain expression, uncomfortable that he is trying to deceive her right in front of her. Turned out he was right to worry. The receptionist immediately intervened and told them she hears every word they say because they are talking too loudly and all that. Alma just stands and asks them to have such suspicious conversations somewhere else next time. He can't help but think that Raul is really the worst at acting quietly. Raul finally sighs with relief when she explains that this is actually not a rule violation because the person who really obtained those items is standing right here. She stamped the official documents with a loud thud and told them to head to the warehouse where the pros could inspect everything at once, so they head to. Go to the back. There, huge pieces of the beast are tied with ropes and hanging eerily from the ceiling. The appraiser begins to check the quality and notices that a regular wild boar costs about 5,000 gold, but this catch is a completely different matter. The appraiser glances around the hall and informs Raul that this year there are way too many boars on the market, so the tusks and claws together will bring only 3,500 gold. Raul simply leaned back with a smile and says that he is quite satisfied if that is enough for a few upcoming meals, and the old man just sighed, noting that Raul, as always, is a guy without a drop of greed. He keeps looking closely at the prey, reproachfully remarks that the boar looks quite battered and the whole thing is, frankly, a complete mess, so he looks Raul straight in the eyes and asks why he doesn't take on some bigger monsters instead of wasting time on these small ones. He tells Raul that his skills are clearly sufficient to endure much tougher fights, and Raul just waved it off with a smile. Don't worry about me, better look at what Alma is doing. The appraiser glanced at the boy but did not understand at all. He says it looks like Alma is just standing and playing with his hands. Alma doesn't even raise his eyes, just tells them to wait a second, is almost done selecting, and meanwhile another. The other two just stared in complete confusion. It turns out they don't even see the transparent magical board that Alma is working on. As if suddenly pulling a strange black cube out of the air, it drips liquid, and the appraiser and Raul just stand there, completely frozen, and Raul starts going crazy, shouting where that thing came from and if it's some kind of magical trick, but Alma just tells him that it is definitely not a trick. The appraiser leans in closely, his eyes wide open as he realizes that the boy is actually using the legendary box. He grabs Alma by the shoulders and shouts that this is madness at his age to perform magic of such a level, while the other two just stand and look puzzled. Alma asks if magic is really such a big deal, and this instantly drives the old man mad. He explodes and yells at him for not understanding anything at all. The appraiser smiles and says that just having a box of items is a guaranteed ticket. Since Raul got so worked up, he tells Alma that he is even more incredible than he imagined himself. Alma tries to downplay it, says it's just a convenient skill and he probably isn't cut out for business. But the appraiser interrupts him. He stared at the things Alma just pulled out. Raul just glanced at the things on the table and shouted because he can't. He can't believe it. In front of him is a real tail and scale of a fire dragon, and the appraiser even adds that in the pile there is a demon general's loincloth and several obsidian bear fangs. Alma catches the look on the appraiser's face and instantly understands. The things he pulled out are not the usual ones encountered here. He starts scratching his head and thinks aloud, maybe those materials really aren't worth that much money. The appraiser and Raul both explode right in his face, shouting that he is an idiot because the truth is exactly the opposite of what he thinks. The old man demands to know why the boy carries so many rare things that can't even be found on the market, and Raul exclaims that the fire dragon is an extremely high-level threat, so Alma just nods under their shouts. The appraiser continues, excitedly explaining that the fire dragon is so dangerous that low-level hunters would simply burn to ashes standing nearby, but suddenly the old man drops everything and begs Alma to allow the guild to buy everything right now. He starts mumbling that he knows Alma will probably check a few places to see who will give him the best price because he is too He is panic-stricken that if he misses the only chance, he will never see these things again, so Alma simply tells him that they can sell them to them. The appraiser can't believe his luck and shouts loudly to make sure the guy is really serious about the deal. In the end, Alma tells him it's okay just as long as he stops crawling on the floor like a madman. The appraiser, wiping his eyes, is so touched and promises Alma to give a good price if only he is given a minute to finish the work. So the old man leans over the table as if nothing else exists and puts all his effort into checking the rare materials. Raul completely loses his head and shouts the final price to $5 million, standing with his mouth wide open. He says to Alma, "I've never even seen so much money in one place before," and Alma herself can hardly believe it. Looking at the report, Alma realizes that just one piece of material is worth a fortune, which means that the things in his chest turned out to be much more valuable than he imagined, so he decides to keep silent about his past. The appraiser says that it has been an eternity since he dealt with something of such quality, especially because they kept him in the drawer for things where he remained completely perfect. The old man just glanced and burst into tears again. He tells the two of them to go to the registration desk with the report he doesn't have that much cash on him, so everything. So Alma politely bows to the man and thanks him for helping so much with the appraisal. The appraiser turns away, his voice breaking in his throat as he tells Alma that he is actually the one who should be thankful. But then the receptionist loudly shouted the price $2.5 million, and everyone in the guild froze, eyes wide open. While waiting for the cash, the guys go out to eat, and Raul feels a bit awkward because Alma is paying for his lunch. But Alma tells him not to worry, without you this appraisal could not have gone so well. Alma even offers to pay him a commission, but Raul waved it off. No formalities, just call me by my name, we are peers. They sit around the table finishing their plates, just killing time while the people from the guild gather that huge pile of money. Raul, between bites, bombards with questions where Alma got such expensive materials and whether he really fought that monster himself. Alma realizes he cannot admit directly that he is a reincarnated wunderkind, so he decides to hide his previous life. To tell Raul a made-up story that his parents, when they kicked him out of the house, left him those things as a farewell gift. Raul bites the bait and looks quite upset, telling Alma that it seems he has really been through a lot. Raul felt guilty for meddling in other people's affairs and apologized for his rudeness, but Alma just waved it off. He says that now he is really glad that his parents kicked him out of the house. Raul looked at him, smiled quietly, and told Alma that he is really a very strong person, noting that having such a positive outlook on things is already a kind of strength. He looks away for a second and admits that he wishes he had the same strength. Alma notices something and asks if it is related to the bruises she sees on Raul's body. This caught Raul by surprise, and he admitted that the old man in the shop said the same thing, that he wouldn't cope with stronger enemies. He sincerely admits to fear, explaining that his body just starts trembling every time he faces someone better than himself. He has a chance to win and is ready to fight, but as soon as he starts thinking that the enemy is stronger or that he might lose, his nerves just get the better of him. Raul explains that his body just freezes, and he becomes so stiff that he literally cannot move. He scratched his head and admitted that probably the life of an adventurer is not for him. But almost stops him on the spot, saying that if he is considered strong, then Raul is definitely strong too. Comment caught Raul by surprise. He just froze in complete shock. Alma tells him that he is one of the best guys she has ever met, especially after he helped strangers all day. He notes that being such a person is not easy for everyone. Any group that wants to assemble a powerful team would be very happy to have someone like Raul on their side. Alma recalls that he was always a loner, even in a previous life, and never really had his own group, but then he turns to Raul again and explains, the ability to sense danger is what makes a warrior real. He says at the end that those adventurers who cannot stop in time are the ones who die. Alma looks him straight in the eyes and says that Raul will one day become a traveler of the highest level. And he even says he will personally vouch for him. Raul just looks back, deeply touched by this support. Thanks him for the compliment, thinking that Alma has such a vibe that he seems much older than their generation. Alma suddenly realizes it is indeed true. If in a past life he lived for 100 years, then now he is already over a century old. They just stood in the guild for a second, and then suddenly someone's voice cut through the room, mockingly asking how such a small guy like him feels. A group of rough guys enters as if they are the masters here, and immediately Raul noticeably tenses up, and Alma just stands trying to understand what is happening. Till this massive guy with a huge scar on his face stops right in front of them, looming over. Casting a glance at the two of them, he lowered his eyes and casually greeted Raul. Raul looks completely stunned. He calls the big guy Evan and tries to explain that he actually intended to pay for this month soon, but Evan just waved it off for now, and Raul was left standing completely confused, not understanding what that guy really wants. He turns his attention to Alma and says he heard about the guy who earlier today brought a bunch of things to the shop. And he says with admiration, imagine even people outside the guild talk about him, and Raul just awkwardly agrees. Evan put on a smug expression and tells them that there are certain rules in this guild, in particular that let all the local adventurers pay a fee, that way they can help each other out when things get really tough. He leaned closer and told Alma that since he was new in town, he would have to pay the registration fee right now. He slapped their table with his hand and loomed over their lunch so they would understand. He was not joking. His face twisted, he glared fiercely at Raul and asked, "What the hell do you think you're doing hanging out with this guy?" Alma only smiled slightly, looked him in the eyes, and told Evan that he was completely wrong about how this would happen. Raul jumped in to save the situation and loudly declared to the thugs that Alma was not an adventurer at all, he was just a client using the guild today. He was not a member, so why should he pay these fake fees at all? Evan did not like this at all, his face twisted, and he said to Raul, "Now you've really asked for it." He grabbed Raul by the head, mockingly teasing that he was cocky just because they had earned a little, and said it was time for another beating. Raul shouted to Alma, "Run," but the boy just stood there, completely confused and not understanding what these guys were even talking about. Suddenly, the girl at the reception loudly shouted across the room, "There was a mistake in the papers." Alma had to come to the desk immediately. She looked at him sternly, clearly trying to give him a reason to avoid trouble. Raul stands up, the chair creaks on the floor, and he tells Alma simply to go ahead, while he stays behind to finish one matter. He friendly pats the boy on the shoulder, briefly smiles, and says, "See you later." Tension finally breaks, and Evan with his team head towards the exit. The heavy doors slam shut behind them as they leave the building. He seems frozen in place, completely stunned, while the receptionist avoids his gaze and looks very tense. He looks down at his feet and suddenly realizes that Raul, just before leaving with those thugs, slipped him something. It turns out to be Raul the adventurer's card, and the boy cannot understand why he simply gave it away. Alma recalls how scared Raul was just a second ago, and she immediately sees something is wrong. The receptionist leans closer and explains that those three are actually some of the few B-rank adventurers in the city. She says in battle they are top-notch, but in behavior a complete nightmare. Rumor has it that they extort people's rewards, passing it off as adventurer's fee. They say those who refuse are made an example of, but they are so talented that even the guild people cannot intervene. Alma looked at her and asked if she called him to the desk just to help him escape. She admits that Raul probably sacrificed himself as bait, allowed the other to escape, and even left his card so that Alma would still get the money. The receptionist slid a heavy bag across the counter and told Alma that this was full payment for his materials. She leans closer with a serious look and insists that, in her opinion, he needs to get out of there as soon as possible. Meanwhile, in the alley, Raul leans against the wall, completely exhausted, while Evan stands over him and says it's time to just give up. Evan rummages through Raul's things and grumbles that he hardly has any money on him. He looks at the empty wallet, and one of his henchmen says, "Maybe we should just go back and grab that guy." Raul tries to hold his position, but he is so scared that the sword literally shakes in his hand. The thugs just stand and laugh at him, mocking how much he trembles while trying to act tough. Evan approaches right up to his face with a sly smile and tells Raul to just stop fighting and join them. He starts pitching him an offer, promises that if he helps them, he will get a share of the money and maybe even a higher rank. The plan is simple, the guy already trusts him, so Raul just has to lure him into the alley and the bandits will do all the dirty work. Raul tries to pull himself together and with a sharp clang draws his sword, aiming it at the bandits, but Evan is much faster. His heavy fist hits Raul right in the face and sends him. He stepped back, stumbling, and Evan only mocks, "Stop pretending to be tough, do what you're told or you'll die." Raul is broken, bleeding and gasping. His hands keep trembling, but then he, laughing through the pain, tells the elders that they have no idea what they're dealing with. Although they just met, Raul knows Alma is on a completely different level than all the others. He wonders how Alma so easily performs high-level magic and finds rare things as if it's no big deal. Maybe the boy was kicked out of home, but in him is the mind and aura of someone much more important than an ordinary novice. Raul can't help but think how such a boy The one who really looked at him and said he could become a first-class adventurer, so he tightly grips his sword. Raul draws his sword and firmly stands his ground. He is not going to let Alma down. Completely beaten, he whispers to himself that he won't let the boy's hopes down, and then he decides, even if he is killed right here, he will die a true adventurer. But Evan is completely losing his head with rage. He looks like he's about to blow everything up around him. Standing over the boy, Evan mocks him for trying to pretend to be some kind of hero while he's still raw. Everything lies in a pool of blood, and Evan says that the boy is just a nuisance that needs to be killed, so they then simply use the slaves to find Alma. Evan raises his sword. It's time to finish the job. Raul is barely holding on, whispered an apology to Alma because he thinks he's just a loser. Everything around begins to fade because a bitter thought flashed through his mind. Becoming the best adventurer was just a foolish dream. Just then Alma appeared at the top of the stairs and was simply furious at what she saw. Raul lifted his head from the floor and froze in shock. Alma was standing before him, and he couldn't believe that this child had really come. Evan just smiled maliciously, laughing at the fact that the boy was foolish enough to come here alone. Raul tries to warn him and shouts to Alma, "Run, because these guys are the highest-ranking adventurers in the city and they only want his money." But Evan tells him to shut up, stomping heavily with his boot right into Raul's back. The blow was brutal, leaving Evan. Evan tells his men, "Keep him alive," and Alma just stands and watches. His face becomes cold and serious. With a self-satisfied smile, Evan asks the boy if he is ready to give all his money. He believes that $2.5 million is a perfectly fair price for 2 lives, but Alma does not tremble at all. Alma stands her ground, not backing down, and asks if Ewan is really the adventurer who drinks the most here. He looks the boy straight in the eyes and tells him that he really doesn't fit that role very well, and then Alma sighs and says that Evan is exactly the guy who babbles too much when the enemy is right in front of him. Evan sharply changes his mood and tells Alma that it seems the boy is looking for a lot of pain. He was going to let him go if he just paid, but now he stopped pretending to be polite. He let out a loud roar and called Peter and Jake to get ready. Peter caught on the fly a bottle of the iron skin potion and swiftly cast this buff on his leader, while Jake closed his eyes and released aggressive force magic, doubling the physical enhancements for Evan. Evan starts laughing, his muscles bulge, his skin creaks. He looms over the boy and says that the sword was never his real weapon. To prove his point, he breaks the hilt of his own sword to dust with one hand, and then he begins to boast that his hands are like an ogre's, and his skin is so tough that no blade can pierce it. He looks down on Alma and says that he doesn't have the slightest chance of winning this fight, but the boy just stands there bored. Evan loses patience and rushes across the floor at full speed, and just then he swung his giant fist right at Alma's head, shouting for him to die, but the boy didn't even blink. Alma didn't even flinch. He just stretched out his hand and caught Evan's massive charged fist as if it were nothing, completely stopping it. Evan was completely stunned, barely managing to utter an embarrassed sound, and began to break out in a cold sweat. 2 lackeys on the side completely lost their minds, shouting that it was impossible for some kid to just stop a blow like that. Keeping the giant at a distance, Alma recalls how in his past life he considered magic his only power. But he suddenly realizes the body he was born into this time is actually much stronger than all the buffs Evan is currently using. To prove it, he grabs Evan by his clothes and hits him with his forehead right in the face. The nose instantly breaks. Jake and Peter just stood there with their mouths agape, completely stunned by what they saw. Evan is stunned, blood flowing from his nose, barely making a sound as Alma pulls his fist back, preparing for the real finishing blow, and then he releases a strike so fast that it really whistles through the air. The force of the blow was so insane that Peter and Jake could only stand and watch as their leader was simply thrown out. Evan lies face down in a huge crater at the back wall. Peter and Jake just stand there looking completely petrified. Peter realizes that even with all those magical buffs and strengthening drugs, Evan had no chance, so he calls Alma a real monster. Alma exhales tiredly, his hand begins to ache, and he thinks that he still doesn't really know how to hit people properly. Evan is in complete denial, barely able to comprehend that he was just smashed with only 2 blows, but he lets out a groan and with all his might starts pulling himself back up. Alma looks at him and indifferently says that this guy is tougher than he seems and how. And panting, Evan asks, why would anyone with such strength even help a loser like Raul? Alma doesn't say a word, just stands and looks down, and that giant keeps asking why he is doing all this, leading everyone. Alma had to stop for a moment and wonder why he got so upset over a guy he only met today. It seems strange to him, especially since nothing like this ever happened in his past life. Suddenly, Evan jumps up and shouts to his subordinates. As soon as he gives the signal, cut Raul's head off. Evan laughs maniacally, points directly at Alma, and tells him that he definitely knows what's what, so it's better not to move at all. Then he gets right up close to Alma's face, shouts and asks if he is really Raul's friend or what. Alma just whispers the word friend under his breath, and finally it dawns on him he really wants to be friends with that guy. He looks back at his past and remembers how he never even had a chance to talk to people. Even in this life, being the third son of a nobleman, he had a circle of acquaintances, but so far there was no one he could call a true friend. He thinks about Raul, a simple, reliable guy who is always ready to take risks for others and doesn't care about himself at all. Alma suddenly understands everything. More than anything, he just wants people like Raul to be happy. He remembers people from his native land of Flanders and feels how much he loves them. And it all comes down to one simple hope that he has been carrying with him all this time. He just wants his friends and family to always be happy. Evan looks at Alma in surprise and asks if he also has the gift of physical enhancement, because he admits that the guy seems to have a bit more raw strength than he does, but then he points to his head and says that for an adventurer what really matters is the ability to use others and make any situation work to your advantage. He bursts out with crazy laughter and says that risking one's life is actually nonsense, because the fight ends even before it begins. Make Raul grit his teeth and ask, "What the hell do you find funny here?" Alma only replies that it's nothing, he just thought everything was the opposite, and just at that moment a heavy dull rumble strikes the ground, and Evan simply explodes, shouting at everyone not to move because Raul's head will be cut off right here. He almost maintains perfect calm and tells the guy that it seems his idea of happiness is the complete opposite of what Evan thinks. Raul looked completely shocked, and Alma clearly made one thing certain. He looks him straight in the eyes and says that the fight is already over. Alma looks extremely serious as he recalls how everything was long before he came here, and suddenly everything goes quiet. Evan and his guys sharply fall to the floor, hitting it with a loud thud. Alma calmly asks what is going on here at all, and the guys behind shout at the top of their lungs, "Jake, Peter, wake up." Without losing calm and without sweating, Alma decided it was time to use his summoning magic. And he pulls out a creature named Nightmare right in front of Evan. He just stands trembling as his world turns into a complete disaster. Approaching Raul, Alma uses a restorative spell called Airy to get him back on his feet. Raul slowly sits down, rubbing his head. He is completely out of it. He looks around and asks what happened and sees strange black creatures pinning Evan to the ground. Raul simply utters Alma's name in complete shock, and the child just smiles and explains that these things are called nightmares, essentially creatures that devour dreams. He continues, they make the one they latch onto see their worst fears and then just sit and feed on that horror. Alma explains that he actually summoned those creatures and hid them even before his arrival, and they won't let go until they have drunk their fill of fear. Raul is simply stunned. Can't believe this guy knows how to use summoning magic. On the floor, Evan completely loses control, sobbing and crying out to his mother as the nightmare consumes him. Almost laughed and wonders what crazy things that guy is seeing, and Raul feels at least a little guilty for joining in, but decides that everything is fine. Raul looked at Alma and quietly apologized, feeling as if he failed. He was supposed to be the one helping the child, but it turned out completely the opposite. He looks quite depressed, says that because of how everything turned out, he is just pathetic. Alma tells him that it's not like that and explains that he actually just came to return something Raul dropped, and this confuses the guy. He pulls out the adventure registration card and asks Raul if this is the important thing he was looking for. Looking him straight in the eyes, Alma promises Raul that one day he will become a great traveler and says she is 100% sure of it. Raul is so moved that he grabs Alma's hand, thanks him, and tells the boy that he truly owes him everything. Someone knocks loudly on the door, 3 quick knocks that pierce the quiet morning. Luna opened the door slightly and replied, clearly surprised to see who was standing on the other side. She asks who those boys are, and Alma says that he is just taking them to the guild, but before dealing with them, he really needed to quickly stop by here. With a serious expression on his face, Alma told her that he had finally made up his mind about something. And all of this is because of where she grew up. Without hesitation, he announces it officially on the spot. He is heading to the territory of Flanders. The next morning, he barely sits up in bed, feeling the hangover hit him like a truck. As it turned out, as soon as they decided to go to Luna's hometown, the three threw a big farewell party and drank too much. Alma touches his forehead and with the magic of healing instantly erases the headache. Alma tells herself that it's time to get up and get ready to go, but then he looks aside and sees Luna right in bed next to him. She is still half asleep, groans and rubs her eyes as she rolls over toward him. Alma is completely frozen cold, sweat breaks out on her as he looks at her intently. She just presses deeper into the pillows and sleepily whispers to him, "Good morning," causing him to stumble in reply. He forces himself to calm down, whispering to himself that she simply forgot to book the room for another night. He allowed her to stay with him and keeps swearing to himself that nothing happened. But then Luna blushes and says that yesterday was really tense. Alma literally lost his mind, he completely lost control, and he begs her to stop joking because his heart is about to give out, and finally finishes telling the story of how they ended up here. When the party finally ended, they leave Talistella behind and set off on a long journey to Flandrea, Luna's home. Raul rides with them, laughs at this story, and then asks if they ever managed to visit the guild. Alma just looks at him with a blank stare, clearly having completely forgotten that part of the plan. From inside the guild building, a loud voice bursts out. Someone is shouting apologies for all the trouble they have caused recently. It turns out this is Evan and his team. They are all on the floor, in a deep bow, looking completely defeated. Evan is a complete wreck, crying, sniffling, and admitting that they did truly terrible things to people. And suddenly they had an epiphany. They began returning every coin they had ever taken from people. Raul just laughed while Evan walked away, wondering what kind of crazy nightmares those guys must have had to turn them into saints overnight. Continuing, Raul says he was just going with the flow there and asks Luna if she really minded that he joined. Luna thought for a moment and said that more people would definitely help. She even added that Raul is surprisingly skilled at his job. Raul gets excited and suggests creating a new party right here and now, and Alma is completely stunned because he had never really imagined himself at a party until this moment came. Raul starts to worry and asks if he is not allowed to join, but Alma simply admits that it is only because he had actually never been to a party before. Alma recalls memories of his past life, how he trained every day completely alone, so he tells Raul that joining the party really sounds fun and he is officially in. Raul immediately loses his head and shouts that it is time to organize a gift ranking contest among the members, which This really caught both of them off guard, but Raul just smiles and says he will go first. He admits that his special gift is the Swordsman of the Wind, an ability that everyone. Alma immediately understands this is perfect for the vanguard. It accelerates sword training and grants a bit of wind magic. Raul explains this ritual is a big deal because the one with the worst gift has to pay for everyone's food and everything else. But Alma can't help but be surprised. Why does Raul turn a happy moment into such a tense game? Raul laughs loudly, confident that he has already won everything, then turns to Luna and asks about her gift. The mood instantly changes when it turns out that Luna actually possesses an incredibly powerful gift of the sage. Raul screamed wildly with excitement, shouting that this is the first time in his life he has met a true sage, while Alma stands stunned, not believing how rare this is. And remembers how he once simply dreamed of that gift for himself. And it wasn't just about him, both of his older brothers were also obsessed with the desire to obtain it, showing how strong the influence his father really had on that man's family. Luna just sweetly shows a V, and Alma tries to process the fact that he never expected to find someone with such a legendary gift wandering around in a place like this. Luna tries to be sweet and says that the gift from the swordsman Gale is actually pretty cool, but Raul just looks annoyed. He was confident until she outdid him. Raul next turns to Alma, confident that he also has some kind of silly gift, and begins to worry that he is the weakest link, and Alma still can't find the words and pressure really starts to weigh. He is already almost sweating, looking completely cornered by this question, like when the most diverse conflicts and anxieties suddenly started racing through his head at the same time. Raul and Luna just look at him confused, not understanding what the matter is, and Alma fears that openness about his power will make everyone feel awkward around him. Although he knows he could easily deceive them, he understands. He does not want to lie to his new friends. Seeing Alma struggling, Raul intervenes and says to him, "You don't have to force yourself to speak if you feel uncomfortable." And adds that if he ever changes his mind, he will just say so then. He glances at Luna for a moment to get her agreement while Luna just looks at them and admits that she actually wanted to boast a little herself. She says she is just honestly talking about it. And Raul just smiles broadly and thanks both of them for being so calm about all this. Luna smiles in response, promising that someday she will tell them both the whole story. Alma realizes he is lucky to have found really great friends, or it is just luck, but in any case they are already convinced that he can handle it completely. Still, Raul admits he is still curious where Alma's power ends. He knows about the boxes with items, summoning, and teleportation plus. Moreover, his magic is absolutely insane. He looks at Alma and directly asks if there is anything he cannot do, which leads to. This makes Alma think that the question is not simple with his magic. He can create practically anything he desires. Raul suddenly remembered a special magic that shows how strong someone is and asked if it was worth trying it on the two of them. Raul thinks the idea is really cool and is almost certainly also willing to try so. They activate analysis magic and assessment beam waves through the group, quickly checking their stats. Having reached the city near the border by carriage, they passed the checkpoint and then proceeded on foot. We set off into the forest. Luna does not take her eyes off the map, and it turns out it takes 2 whole days to reach her territory. They quickly set up camp. The sun is already setting, and Alma takes out food for everyone while no one noticed a bunch of camping gear in his inventory from his past life, so he finally decided to use it. It's really cool. His magic keeps all their food and water fresh all the time. Looking at the cozy camp, Luna suddenly remembered how, when leaving home for the first time, she had to carry a giant heavy backpack. Raul just laughs and says she is lucky. Alma makes the way back much easier. Alma just smiles, thinking how quiet it is in the forest, not a single monster to spoil the mood. A giant white wolf sits in the dark trees and watches the group, just sitting there, and Alma looks around and quietly utters the name Fenrir under his breath. He understands when such a beast is nearby. It's no wonder other monsters are afraid to show themselves. Raul says the food is wonderful, and Luna agrees she enjoys eating a little outside. Alma watches and marvels. These Fenrirs are so smart and strong, they seem to rule this forest. Suddenly a voice sounded in his head, telepathy, and that's all. Alma replies that he probably has never met any Fenrir before. The wolf says that's not the point, he just came to see what kind of monster appeared in the forest. Alma asks if it's about him and says calling him a monster is too harsh. The wolf just looked at him and asked if he even understands how much magic he radiates. Alma tells himself that he is quite confident in his magic levels because in his previous life he trained insanely, and Fenrir says that his enormous strength frightens the entire forest. Monsters tremble with fear, and even the giant wolf admits that he is also a bit tense, which means it makes him almost stop and think. He realizes that the thing all those monsters were really afraid of turned out it was not the legendary wolf at all, it was him all along. After that bar chaos, he now tries not to let magic out unless he is casting spells, but animals clearly sense such things better than humans. Alma feels that he messed up a bit. He released his energy too loudly, so he decides to fix it right now. He pulls out Nimli's concealment spell, a trick to hide his presence, and stands there for a moment, concentrating to firmly control all that power. Fenrir is simply stunned. He says that Alma's presence has completely disappeared, as if he is trying to track a wisp of mist. In the camp, Luna also senses that something is wrong. She says that Alma's energy seems to have faded, and now she can only guess what is really happening. Raul looks around and sees that Luna is acting strangely, and someone nearby asks her what is going on in F. And Fenrir watches them closely, squinting. He understands that the group has finally noticed his presence, and when the mood changed, Raul began to tremble, and Luna just froze and stared ahead in shock. Raul can barely pronounce the word. He stutters. This is Fenrir, the legendary S-class monster, standing right in the middle. In the middle of the forest, he finally puts all the pieces together and understands why it was so quiet here. It was a bad sign from the start. Raul shouts for everyone to retreat, but he himself is almost completely calm. He tells Raul to calm down because the wolf is not hostile, although it is his fault that the other monsters kept their distance. At that moment, a loud rustle came from the trees. It became clear that something was wrong, and someone asked what was really happening. Sitting by the fire with a huge wolf nearby, Alma notices something. There is a strange pressure coming from Luna, which he has never felt before, and when the air begins to glow, Luna has a serious look and light swirls around her. Behind Luna, a huge shining spirit suddenly appears like a true divine figure. Luna focuses and calls for mercy in her eyes. It is clear that she is ready to let go. She releases the giant spirit emerging behind her and fires a colossal burst of white energy that fills everything around. Fenrir the wolf is completely confused by the sudden display of power. He just stands and looks at Luna. She is as shocked as he is by what she just did. Alma realizes that it was he who finally stopped the attack on reflex. A dull thud sounded on the ground, and Fenrir wonders if the girl's reaction was even necessary. Alma raises her gaze to the huge wolf and says that he apologizes, explaining that Luna was just a little scared, and he adds that he hopes the wolf will find the strength to forgive her. Fenrir remains calm and even apologizes himself, saying that he was the rude one for appearing in the middle of the night in such a way. Alma tells Luna that the wolf is not a threat to them. He could have gotten rid of them before they even noticed him if he wanted to, and Fenrir agrees. The giant wolf watches her closely, but thoughts about that strange magic she just used and where it came from trouble him. Luna looks completely exhausted after the last reception, and Fenrir felt that her magical wave radiated the magic of a challenge. But before they moved on, the giant wolf put all the dots. He told Alma that she is a girl, not a boy. Alma feels bad and apologizes well. Raul hides behind a tree and is simply beside himself. Alma is really talking to the legendary wolf. Alma indifferently says that it is just telepathy, and Raul feels even worse about his own abilities, grumbling that some child knows much more magic than a wise man like him. Raul finally gathers his courage and asks why Fenrir even appeared in their camp, and the she-wolf explains the real reason. She says there is someone else who cannot wait to meet Alma. It seems this person desperately wants Alma to be nearby, forcing everyone. Alma agreed to the meeting, but he is simply stunned. A beast the size of Fenrir came all the way here just to deliver an invitation. Alma remains amazed. What kind of insanely strong person can afford to command even the forest lord, which she is? Fenrir only shows her gratitude and asks if he is ready to go meet him right now. Fenrir watches as she makes a shocking confession. That little creature nearby is actually her son, and as soon as Luna sees the little one, she simply loses her head and the puppy just stands, wagging its tail and waving its paw. Raul is just in shock, shouting admiringly how incredible this monster is, and the puppy just sits, looking cute, and Alma can't hold back and tells the little wolf pup that he is not scary at all, and that means. Because of this, Raul looks quite nervous, and Luna only shouts how cute that little one is. The puppy rolls onto its back, shows its belly, snaps back in response, reminding everyone that he is also Fenrir. He pretends to be tough with all his might, laughs, and asks the group if they finally fear him, but everything turns against him. The whole group just stands and thinks he is too cute to be threatening. Raul finally gives in and starts petting him, asking the little wolf pup if he is hitting the right spots. Raul blushes wildly when he talks about how fluffy that wolf is, and Luna simply cuddles the wolf cub and is completely focused on its fur. The little wolf cub adores the attention, demands more petting, and Raul notices that it is in a wonderful mood. And Raul can't hold back, shouting that he also wants to pet the fluffy one, but Alma moves on to talk to Fenrir's mother. She becomes serious and asks Alma why someone like him ended up in these parts. He almost starts to answer, but suddenly stops, realizing that he actually hasn't asked Luna for all the details yet. So he simply tells the giant wolf that he needs to take care of matters further in the territory. This made Fenrir wary, as if warning him that forest monsters might already be coming out to raid the local fields. Alma listens confusedly as they talk about monsters that have caused trouble, and listening to that noise, Senator Fenrir explains that the forest has recently almost stopped yielding crops, forcing the creatures to go and destroy human settlements just to find enough food to survive, leaving everything. He almost froze there for a moment, just thinking about how badly people nearby have suffered. Alma gazes at the landscape and thinks that Thanatart was only a small corner, so Luna's native lands are probably very similar to it. If such a tiny territory falls under monster raids, the people there will have a hard time. He realizes, while everyone is heading to the kingdom, these rural corners barely survive and are becoming empty. This makes him wonder if Luna's request is really connected to all these problems. He almost starts to devise a plan, thinking that instead of just going out and killing monsters, he felt he had to do more, so he thanks Fenrir for the hint, and the giant wolf only quietly murmurs in response. Fenrir asks what he plans and suggests telling the forest monsters to retreat and leave that territory alone, but Alma just smiles and says it's okay, because he will actually use this whole mess to his advantage. The giant wolf fixed his gaze on him, repeating the word "take advantage," and asked if he was going to do something suspicious here. Alma gives nothing away, just turns to the wolf and tells him not to worry about it. Alma smiled slightly and said hopefully that he hopes his plan will hurt no one and will ultimately turn out good for all involved. Hearing this, Fenrir says he will take him at his word mostly because he considers Alma's mind the sharpest of all mortals he has ever met. He seems quite surprised and asks the giant wolf if he can really read minds, but Fenrir waved it off, saying it was just a matter of experience, leaving the boy a little confused while the wolf says he has been in the world for 1,000 years and has seen all kinds of people, so he can discern a person's character with just a look in their eyes. Alma suddenly realized and said, if this is the Lord of Monsters Fenrir, then he seems to really love people. The wolf admits that perhaps that is why he keeps his territory so close to humans. Before leaving, Fenrir told Alma, come to me if you ever need anything, I still owe you a great favor. The little puppy is bursting with excitement and shouts that he also wants to go to the village, but his dad immediately stopped this, and after 2 wolves ran away, everyone finally settled down for the night. Alma again replays Fenrir's words in her head. It seems to her that those wolf talks about debt are too much since he just found that man's son. The morning sun rises, and the fire that warmed them at night is now just cold embers. The group moves forward, walking along the forest path toward the gates visible in the distance. Finally, they reach Flandrea, a simple village with thatched roofs and dirt roads and all that. It almost freezes for a second, looking back and realizing that this quiet little place is Luna's true home. Luna, wasting no time, tells them to follow her and immediately sets off ahead. She walked past small houses and fences, and the rest of the boys followed right behind her, not falling behind. Alma cannot take her eyes off the simple tools and rural life, and Raul laughs a little and says that it is insanely quiet here, much more rural than he had ever imagined. Alma agrees it is really quiet here, but it is clear that he is beginning to feel some strange tension in the air. The sun slowly sets behind the mountains and bathes the simple houses in warm, gentle light. Alma and Raul stop to take it all in, looking around the landscape with sincere admiration. Luna notices that they are falling behind, turns around, and anxiously asks if everything is all right. Raul is a little embarrassed and says that it is nothing, that he and Alma were just talking about how beautiful it is here. Alma agrees. The whole village is incredibly peaceful and quiet. Luna smiles gently and says that he is right, adding that there are wonderful people here and a very pleasant place. She tells them not to stop and leads the boys deeper into the very heart of the village. Alma looks at her and thinks about how much Luna must love her native city and the people who live here. He decides that he is actually quite excited to finally meet and talk with the people of this region, and just at that moment they approach a huge wooden building that stands out among everything around. Raul freezes in amazement. Luna leads the group inside the building and exclaims that she has finally returned home, but as soon as she steps over the threshold, the younger girl rushes to her and knocks her down. The blow was so strong that it completely knocked the breath out of Luna, and she started coughing. Jerk pushes them both. They roll across the room and crash into the wall while Alma stands and watches. And the younger girl simply hugged her and shouted excitedly, "Glad you came back." She leans closer, looks into her eyes, and asks if everything is all right, if by any chance she is not sick. Then she explains how much she worried about Luna returning safely because she is completely disoriented. Luna mumbles that at least she will find her own home, and her sister just laughs in response. And when Luna complains that her clothes got ruined after the tackle, the girl tells her no excuses. Meanwhile, Alma realizes that he has just met Luna's younger sister. Luna starts the introduction, tells Sanya that Alma is here to help them, and then she demonstratively points at Raul, calls him an extra, and finally introduces Sanya to Alma. Alma greeted warmly and said she would stay nearby for a while, so he hopes they will get along, but Sanya only looks at him suspiciously, barely whispering a quiet hello. Later, a man with thick mustaches meets them and warmly thanks the group for coming to their remote land. He introduced himself, Eric, and said that the woman next to him is his wife Mabel. And it turns out Eric is actually Luna's father and the lord who rules this entire land, and both he and his wife were incredibly hospitable, so the group felt completely welcome in their home. Everyone gathers closely around the table with warm food and chats lively with each other, although it seems someone in the room still holds a bit of a grudge. Luna turned to her little sister and called her by name, trying to make her behave politely, but she doesn't stop, passionately explaining that Alma and Raul came all the way from Talistella at her request, although Raul is not at all thrilled that he was mentioned last. Luna tells Sanya that her attitude towards guests is not right, and the girl swallows, looks away, and pouts, but then Sanya repeats the name of the city to herself, and it seems like something finally clicked in her head. She asks if Luna really had to look for a strong fighter in the labyrinthine city of Labstella, a question that Luna was simply stunned by this. Sanya notes that Talistella is just a trading town and tells her sister that she should have checked the information before leaving. While Sanya reproaches and says that this is exactly why Luna shouldn't travel alone, Luna just sweats and tries to brush it off, saying everyone makes mistakes. Luna is completely confused by this reprimand and honestly, it makes Sanya here seem like the older sister she constantly picks on her. Finishing her tirade, Sanya snorts and turns away, leaving Alma standing in a very awkward silence. It is clearly visible that Sanya is nervous and does not trust the newcomers at all, and here is D. Probably behind her defensive attitude towards everyone lies a big reason. One of the local farmers looks completely broken, saying that recently monsters have been destroying their fields, so they even set up scarecrows to stop the damage, but it didn't help at all. The day after arriving in Flanders, things didn't look much better, but almost. Alma sets out with Eric to meet the locals to finally hear what is really happening in the village. All these stories are like one and the same. In recent years, monsters have become much more active. Eric listens as they tell how recently a farm nearby was attacked. And as if that wasn't enough, the land here is completely empty and dead, and that means that although no one has died yet, the lack of harvest and money simply keeps everyone in poverty. Eric looks completely broken when he admits, although he is the lord here, he cannot fight and cannot help the harvest and honestly, it drives him crazy that he is so powerless while his people suffer. Looking at him, Alma sees how much that guy really cares and understands that. Behind Eric's gentle face burns an immense passion for all who live in his domains. It was clear to Alma, Luna probably grew up watching how her father felt this, but suddenly Eric came to his senses and apologized. The pressure of the situation overcame him for a moment. He tells Alma that he is sincerely glad to have come from another region and hopes to give himself time to settle in. Alma just watches Eric's reaction, and Luna is already giggling at how suddenly her father's mood changed. Eric tries to get everything back on the right track, saying that very soon he will take a few steps, leading the G. The group went deeper into the forest, and conversations about the future of the village did not cease. The girl stands among the trees and gazes into the very depths of the forest. Alma thinks about Sanya and wonders if a child like her really has business all the way in the forest. He turns to Eric and says, "I told you monsters have been very active here lately." Eric confirms this. The most dangerous now are poisonous lizards. They are bustling, storing food and preparing to lay eggs. In the forest, Sanya clenches her hand into a fist, reminding herself that approaching the nest is strictly forbidden, but she notices something through the trees and realizes she has finally found what she was looking for. Right next to a huge hollow tree crawls a bunch of poisonous lizards. Sanya nestled in the bushes and held against the wind so the monsters wouldn't catch her scent. She takes out some sleeping pollen and throws it into the air, watching the cloud of dust drift toward the nest. Everything works perfectly, so she stealthily moves past the sleeping lizards, whispering to herself, "Just don't rush." Sanya peeks out from behind the stones, confident that everything is going exactly as she planned, but then she starts to worry. How will she carry everything back herself, regretting not taking her sister? Suddenly, a poisonous lizard jumped out with a loud hiss and completely caught her by surprise. Sanya panics, wondering why it woke up if her sleepy pollen was supposed to keep it asleep for several hours. The lizard didn't wait and spat a glob of disgusting poison right at her. Almost hits it, strikes a nearby tree and melts the wood right from the trunk. The monster looks confused. It missed and suddenly sees Alma calmly sitting in the branches. Alma jumps down and asks Sanya if she is okay, and she just looks at him in complete astonishment. He says that one lizard was probably already dozing, its breathing had slowed, and it simply didn't notice the pollen. Alma gives her a smile, says that he is simply glad he followed her, and asks if she can tell him the whole story. Sanya froze for a moment, and it is clear that there is a whole storm of thoughts in her head, before she finally finds her voice and thanks Alma for intervening and saving her. Alma asks why she would risk it at all and approach that nest again. He thinks she is after the eggs, but she replies that he is mistaken. She explains that she was actually trying to retrieve the harvest that the monsters stole from their village. This completely caught Alma by surprise. He had no idea that the lizards would want plants at all. He recalled how the Lord spoke about monster attacks and how that man did not seem worried at all. Alma says it would be much easier to hunt wild beasts for food, but Sanya tenses up and sharply replies that this is not enough. He stubbornly looks him straight in the eyes and says that if nothing changes soon, pressure will become unbearable and her father will lose everything, his lordly title. Having let it all out, Sanya finally exhausted her strength and fell into a deep sleep. Eric stands in his office with his back to Alma, realizing that Sanya has probably already confided their situation to someone. Turning around to meet his gaze, he admits that he will soon be stripped of the title Lord. Alma just looks back, mentally understanding that the girl actually told him only a tiny part of what is happening. Eric does not stop, explaining to the whole group that their territory has not been able to pay any tribute to the crown for several years. He tells how every year they had to send the harvest to the capital, but crop failure and monster attacks destroyed everything. In the capital, the authorities whisper that he is no longer fit for this job. He lowers his gaze and says that the inspector will arrive in just 3 days, and he hoped to manage to gather the harvest. But the problem with monsters has only worsened recently. These creatures constantly destroy everything they try to grow. Alma finally understood everything. He sees why Sanya so recklessly tried to cope with those monsters alone. Alma raises his hand and tells Eric that he might have a temporary solution to their problem. Alma tries to help everyone. Could they simply buy the harvest in other towns and use it for delivery? Eric's wife Mabel intervened and explained that they had already thought about it. She shows them the warehouse and says they need 5,000 gallons of harvest, but even if they stripped the entire territory, they would have only 1,500. And everything must be at least quality B, but they simply cannot afford to buy so much anywhere else. Eric looks completely broken, says there are only 3 days left and he has no options at all and no. He knew that he would probably be expelled or accused of harming the country's interests, but suddenly Sanya loudly exclaimed that her father was not guilty of anything. Eric just looks at her, and Sanya is clearly already tired. She sharply turns to Alma's group and says that they have seen many people who appeared and pretended to want to help. She explains that these advisors usually just talk nicely to deceive her good father and then steal his money and run away, leaving them stuck on barren lands, which are constantly destroyed by monsters anyway. Sanya keeps shouting that her father is not to blame for all this and that there are simply too many bad people around. She broke down, grabbed her head, and asked herself why exactly her father must suffer so much. Eric shouts her name, standing over her and watching as his daughter sobs on the floor while he gently strokes her head, says he is proud that she got angry for him, but explains, being a leader means believing in people and taking responsibility when everything goes wrong. Luna just looks at them with pain on her face, feeling the weight of the situation and glancing from father to sister. Almost stands by the door, watching everything and with pain in his heart wishes to return earlier and help. He understands that 3,500 gallons of harvest are needed to fix this. This number throws him off balance, especially because he knows well there is not nearly that much food in his box of items. Seeing the family pressed close to each other in complete despair, Alma decided he just wants to find a way to make them happy again. Eric looks up at him and says sincerely, he has no right to ask for help if he cannot even offer a reward, but it is clear he is already on the edge. Eric looks at the floor, completely broken, and asks Alma to take care of the people here when he is gone. He wants her to share his wisdom with the village for whoever becomes the next lord, and he honestly admits things are bad here, and it is only because he was a foolish leader. The people who live here do not deserve to suffer because of his mistakes. Alma just looks at him and understands that even when Eric has lost everything, he still thinks only about the safety of his people. Suddenly, Alma looks Eric straight in the eyes and says that he will manage. Eric's eyes light up. He can hardly believe what he hears and asks if Alma is really serious. The boy seems to have taken a heavy stone off his shoulder. He sighs deeply with relief and says that he can finally relax. The territory will be fine, even if he is forced to leave. But almost stops him in his tracks, saying that there will be no later because he will never let Eric go. He knows this may seem a bit selfish, but he has already decided to intervene. He immediately opens his box of things. Piles of items begin to fall from the air and crash loudly onto the ground. Eric is just sitting on the floor in complete shock. He looks up at Alma, completely confused, and asks what is going on here. Alma gives him a calm smile and says that everything will be settled in 3 days, and Eric will be able to fix this mess. He is determined to make sure that this man remains Lord, and for that, he definitely knows what he has to grow: 3,500 gallons of crop to save the situation. Alma reviews a pile of goods and says that their quality seems good to him, and Eric just stands stunned by what he sees and cannot utter a single word. Raul cannot contain his excitement, grabs Alma by the shoulders and shouts his name, while Alma only tries to comprehend this sudden outburst. Luna watches how everything unfolds with a worried expression and quietly whispers Alma's name, and Sanya stands nearby. It is clear that both feel the weight of the situation. Clock ticks, the kingdom will send people to investigate in just 3 days, so there is almost no time left. Alma looks at the dry, desolate earth in his hands and tells everyone that they need to start preparing right now. In the memory of that meeting, Eric looks completely desperate as he addresses Julius with the question of whether he really wants all of them to die. He does not stop begging him, constantly reminding him how much they have actually done over the years and what they have sacrificed for the country. Eric calls this whole situation outrageous and begs him to think about the territory, and most importantly about the people who live there and have nowhere to go. But Julius is not moved at all, calmly explaining that if you look at the country as a living being, you have to be ready to cut off infected parts to save the rest. He loudly warns if they do not dare to take the painful step and get rid of the problematic districts, the whole country will be doomed. Eric understands that they have hit a dead end and says that there is no point in talking further, so he gives a signal. His men draw their blades, magic flares up, and they prepare for battle. One of the knights leans closer and asks Eric if he is really serious about this, considering who they will have to deal with, and Eric is just trying to figure out their next move. He drops the official tone and shouts at Julius to get ready, calling him the Great Sage while preparing himself. He is gripped by panic as huge icy spikes burst forth and instantly freeze everyone. Let everyone remember, Julius is officially the most powerful wizard in the entire kingdom, and after the dust settled, Edward called Eric a sinner for tax evasion and ordered the guards to impale his head on a stake by the front gates. Walking away from the bloody slaughter, Julius calmly asks Edward what is next on their list, and Edward becomes serious and says he wants to discuss some personnel issues regarding the territory of Flanders. The two of them move deeper into the palace, leaving all the mess behind. The sun shines over the massive palace walls and Julius walks along the quiet garden paths as if he has a lot on his mind, and while he glanced over at Edward and asked how the situation looked in the lands of Flanders. Edward admitted, although the harvest is almost ready for shipment, the remote location turns organizing everything into a real headache. But Julius is not worried at all. He simply nods and says that everything is moving exactly according to his plan. Edward says that although Flanders is so far away, it is a strategic throat between the Western empires, so it must be kept under control in case everything goes awry. And then he clearly says that if the local lord tries to interfere with them, he must simply be killed without any hesitation. He closes his eyes and says to his subordinate, "I trust Yaudiel with the rest of the dirty work as you see fit." Suddenly we move to the edge of the territory. Here finally appears a boy named Cedric, who looks at the trees and notices he is officially in Flanders. Cedric, the royal appraiser, adjusts his monocle and aloud wonders if this is just another boring province somewhere in the middle of nowhere. Until a local boy appeared and bowed low, thanking him for having traveled such a long way to visit them. While they were walking, someone noticed that the local lord greeted them with open arms, and Eric gestured for them to follow him, leading the way through the trees until Edward looked suspiciously, thinking to himself that this man could definitely afford to be generous right now. He remembers reports that these people are nowhere near meeting the quota and probably mix in scraps to pass off a larger volume, but suddenly Eric stops and says that they have arrived. Eric points to the huge boxes and says that there are exactly 5,000 kilograms of harvest here just as requested, and this is not at all the junk Edward expected. Edward almost breaks into a sweat, asking, "What the hell is going on?" And Eric just looks and says there is one big problem with the harvest. He scratched his head and admitted that at first it was supposed to be only at B, but most turned out to be A, and Edward could not understand why this should be bad at all. Edward just stands stunned, muttering that this must be nonsense, while Cedric tries to get his attention. Cedric picks up a potato and examines it carefully. Now he is definitely convinced that Eric was not lying about its quality. He cannot believe his eyes, saying that it is just crazy to see so many rows of crops gathered together in one place. He looks at the shiny fruits and admits he has been a royal appraiser for years but has never seen anything like what is happening in Flanders. Edward completely loses it, shouting that it is impossible. Flanders should have neither the money nor the technology for such crops, and he starts asking how they did it when Cedric intervenes with interest and says he really wants to know the secret for his future studies, Eric replies, "Let the expert explain everything." He almost stands there with a confident expression on his face, as if he has everything under control, while he greets Edward for the first time with a polite smile, showing all possible kindness before he calls himself Alma Fellows, but suddenly restrains himself and and corrects it, telling the sweaty and stressed Edward that he is now simply Alma. Edward recognizes the surname Fells from the nobility of the Eastern Empire, and at that very moment someone explains that Alma works as an advisor for this territory. Alma tells the group to follow him, jokingly says that Edward looks too tense for a simple farm inspection and leads them further while. Still, Edward admits that the fields look incredibly fertile, and Cedric cannot believe that they still have a huge surplus after everything they have already given to the kingdom. Alma just looked at them and, as if in passing, said that the fields they are now seeing were actually planted only this morning. Edward and Cedric just lost it. Edward shouted back to ask again if Alma really meant that everything was planted only this morning. And Cedric is also in a panic, shouting that it is impossible for plants to grow from seeds to full size in less than a day. It turned out the secret is in a special liquid sprayed on every field throughout the territory. And the inspectors immediately recognize it as the legendary fertilizer of the god of harvest, a crazy thing that makes crops grow at an incredible speed. Cedric leaned over Alma, so close to her face, and asked desperately how he could even get something so legendary and precious. Alma just looks puzzled and asks if it is really such a big deal, and Cedric says he has only seen mentions of it in old books. Cedric continues the history lesson, his eyes burning as he says, "This fertilizer not only works quickly, it keeps the soil rich and fertile for the next 100 years. And the local peasants stood, mouths agape, barely able to repeat the thought that the land would last so long. Raul looked at Alma, laughed, and said that it seems that the boy, besides magic, also has a natural talent for farming. But Alma just shrugs, telling them that he has no special talent, it's just that a rare item happened to be in his bag. One of the visitors could no longer contain his curiosity and asks Alma what these things are, and in general. Alma only nods while the boy points to those strange stones sticking out all over the field. Alma tells them that it is actually a crystal of magical essence, and both the visitor and Alma herself are left puzzled. Alma jokes that the scientist already knows this, but with enthusiasm begins to explain that the nutrients in the soil are everything. She whispers to them that the most important thing in the soil is the magical essence of the earth. He explains that this magical essence is essentially a tiny particle that exists in everything. Because it is in the air and in the soil, so plants absorb it and the harvest becomes much better. By throwing crystals into the field, he seemingly forces the plants to give the best harvest, leaving. Cedric stands speechless, trying to understand how such a method is even possible. The scientist is noticeably trembling, realizing that what the boy just described is a real breakthrough. Cedric is trembling, he cannot believe that he hadn't thought of such a method until now, and he repeats to himself over and over the magical essence of that word, as if trying to solve a puzzle. He begins to explain that magical essence usually just hovers in the air or hides in the soil. It does not turn into crystals by itself, but on the contrary. But once, when adventurers were in fashion, these crystals were obtained only in the deepest and most dangerous parts of dungeons, so they cost a fortune and no one risked spending them on something like farming. He looks Alma straight in the eyes and asks how a boy in his place could have gotten something so rare that. This simply threw Alma off balance. He clearly cannot say that it is a trophy from a dungeon he conquered in a past life, so he just lies and says he got it from some acquaintance. Cedric thinks that the one who gave it to him probably did not even realize how much it actually costs, although that was not the only thought in his head. He still had one big question for the boy. He says that now he understands the quality of the harvest, but the arithmetic does not add up. It is impossible for such a tiny village to have so many people to plant and harvest everything so quickly. So he asks Alma if they hired a bunch of outsiders to get the job done, and Alma only replies, no. Alma tells Cedric that the kingdom's representatives are quite resourceful, and then adds that he actually ordered his servants to hide so as not to scare the guest. And this leaves Cedric standing there completely bewildered, not understanding what that boy is talking about at all. Suddenly, a whole pack of wild boars and wolves emerges in the middle of the fields. Cedric completely loses his head from panic. Real monsters are standing right in front of him. Almost calmly explains that these are the same monsters that once attacked the village, but now they have been tamed. They work in the fields in exchange for food. He boasts a huge stone slab, the relief of the Lord of Demons, which they say can enchant any monster that looks at it. Cedric watches as a giant boar pulls a heavy cart with supplies, still doubting whether a single stone can really protect people from being eaten. Alma explains these are just low-level monsters. They lack the strength to fight the magic of the stone, unlike a beast of the Fenrir class. To prove her point, Alma puts on a spectacular show. The board jumps through a flaming ring like a circus trick, and she tells Cedric that they can do almost anything he wishes. Cedric, as if seeing a ghost, shockingly tells Alma that this is impossible. That stone is a legendary artifact of the demon race. Edward noticeably sweats and looks worried. He thinks to himself that the demon race would never let go of such a legendary item because of their pride, forcing him. His head spins even more. He wonders why anyone in such a remote place could even have it, and cannot understand how someone as young as Alma managed to get it. Alma puts on a slight smile, trying to ease the tension. She says she understands their surprise, but they can relax. The monsters obey every command they are given. Suddenly, Cedric begins to sob into a handkerchief and says that all of this is simply incredible, while Alma stands completely bewildered by his reaction. Cedric says that he never imagined that someone could turn monsters into a workforce and considers this a real salvation for the tiny territory that lacks people. While Cedric cries and wipes his eyes, Alma just watches and wonders, are all appraisers so sensitive about their work? Let's move on. Cedric turns to his companion and asks Edward if he doesn't think that this whole situation is simply amazing. Edward has to admit, Flanders has undergone a huge metamorphosis. Just a few days ago it was a boring, flat area, and now it is completely different. While Alma looks up at him, Edward mutters to himself that he needs to make a report about this as soon as possible. Then, Luna looks depressed, says that people are already beginning to doubt whether her father is fit to be a lord at all, and someone quickly assures her that this is not the case at all. Cedric smiles confidently and says that, being a judicial appraiser, he will recommend to the council to take this village as an example to show everyone how it is done. If everything goes according to plan, the kingdom can really intervene and provide serious support, and Luna and Eric can hardly believe their ears when Raul starts jumping for joy and tells Alma that he really succeeded. Alma blushes from all this praise, especially when Raul mentions how much Eric helped for the meeting. Meanwhile, Eric just stands, stunned by how radically everything has changed for the better. It is almost too much for him to comprehend. Suddenly he burst into tears, saying that just a few days ago he had completely given up on the idea of a shared future with everyone. He is clearly confused, so Raul smiles broadly at Alma and definitely thanks him for everything he has done for the territory. Alma just looks at him, a little embarrassed by such attention, while Luna watches them from the side. She thinks to herself that Alma is simply incredible, because she never thought they could really turn the whole situation around in just 3 days. But Sanya puts in her word and says that Alma is just different. Luna looks at her, a little confused by the comment, So Sanya, with a gentle look, continues to explain, saying that Alma is unlike any of the people who came here to him before. Luna lowers her eyes and blushes, quietly agreeing with her sister, because only now does she realize the weight of everything Alma has done. Alma stands outside, looks up at the sky, and asks himself what this strange feeling is. Everything was supposed to go smoothly, but he can't get rid of the feeling that something is wrong. It is an obsessive, inexplicable feeling of discomfort that gnaws at him from the inside and makes his chest restless when he sits and wonders if he has mixed something up. Meanwhile, in the carriage, someone excitedly says how incredible the territory of Flanders turned out to be, and Cedric put in a word. He did not expect this place to be so developed even before their arrival. Edward, with a serious expression on his face, agrees that it is true, and so a whole week passes after Edward and Cedric returned home. Territory transformed beyond recognition. Monsters took on all construction and road works. One of the locals sees a wolf monster running up and greets it as if it were an old friend. A woman gently asks if it has finished working and offers it food, showing that the residents who once feared them have finally gotten used to their presence. Alma boasts about the magic of her box of things in the middle of the fields, and a black cube hovers right in front of a local farmer, who looks completely shocked by what he sees. Farmer can't believe his eyes and, excited, asks if Alma can just endlessly do that thing, but Alma sighs and says, no, the space inside depends on how much magical power a person has, so it changes. Watching all this, Luna's sister grumbles angrily that it's completely unfair. She starts complaining that she always has to carry heavy water until her whole body aches. She is terribly annoyed that Alma calmly performs high-level magic that she herself can't even do. Luna doesn't pity her. She tells her sister directly that it's not Alma's fault. She is simply physically weak because she hides in her room all the time. Luna doesn't calm down. She points out that her sister grew up without any skills except magic and is also very bad at orientation, while the sister justifies herself, saying she studied magic a lot. Eric sees the tension rising and awkwardly suggests maybe they should just leave it as it is so that everyone. Alma just stands and thinks while Eric admits that, despite all efforts, such magic really feels like a cheat code. Alma turns to Luna and asks if she wants to try mastering magic herself, and this completely caught her sister by surprise because she repeats a loud item box and looks as if she finally found a goal worth striving for. The two of them enter Luna's room, actually a huge private library, piled with books up to the ceiling. Alma looks around a little surprised and says with amazement that this is actually her room. And he notices high-level grimoires are scattered on the floor as if it's nothing at all. Luna's sister fusses a little and tries to explain what is happening, and Alma just looks at her. She delves into technical details and explains that the skill item box actually has two strict requirements. First, a magic power rating of at least 1000. Then she raises two fingers and adds the second requirement to be able to use spatial teleportation magic. But thinking her power is only 600, she realizes she still lacks 400 points. Suddenly, she decides to go to the forest to hunt monsters to level up and forces Alma to grab her and tell her to slow down a bit. Alma looks up with a smile and says, since they are already here, why not use the secret weapon that will lead to? Luna's sister looked back at him completely puzzled and asked, what do you mean by secret weapon? He pulls out a shining fruit, and she immediately recognizes it, asks if it is really a golden apple. A quick glance, it is immediately clear. This is a rare fruit from the sacred tree that enhances mana. Alma says that if she eats it, she will gain 500 to total mana. She looks at the glowing thing as if doubting and asks him if she really has to eat it. So Alma asks if she simply doesn't like golden food in appearance and offers to find another option if it seems too strange. She just smiles and says she is not going to doubt him now, taking the fruit in her hands, and she bit off a big piece, completely stunned, and blurted out that it is actually tasty. She begins enthusiastically telling that it is perfectly sweet and refreshing, and the sourness balances everything just right. Alma admits that he has already tried it before and it was incredible. Although the boost has a maximum of 2500, he still wants more. Danya feels a warm sensation spreading throughout her body, as if energy is bursting inside, and at that very moment she feels her magical power beginning to grow right here and now. So she looks at Alma with a piercing gaze and asks him if she can have another one. But Alma tells her that later she can have another one, keeping her focused on the task because Danya says that the only thing they lack right now is a teleportation spell, like the one Alma used before. She saw it in grimoires called Magic of Instant Movement, although those books always say that spatial magic is extremely rare to see and even harder to manage to apply. Alma thinks about how differently the quality of those magical books can be. It all depends on which one you find, and it turns out that finding a book with the necessary information is already half the battle when you try to learn so. The first step to mastering spatial magic is to fully feel and understand the space around you. Alma calculates the basics in her head, thinking about how teleportation works. It swaps the magical essence of the destination with the place where you stand, that's why Sanya says that a familiar place makes everything much easier, and Alma completely agrees with her. Sanya explains that the trick is to create a distance between those two for a fraction of a second during the exchange, although it is very difficult, you have to perfectly imagine landing exactly at those coordinates to truly master the spell. She admits that the whole idea is too complicated to grasp immediately, but she is still ready to try her best, so Alma encourages her. Because she is still learning, Sanya asks Alma if he can show her an example of how it should look, but Alma insists let's start small. A short distance across the room becomes their goal for the first attempt. They don't stop for long. Sanya urges him on, forcing him to try that movement again and again until suddenly Luna bursts in to say that the tea is finally ready and they probably should take a break. But while Sanya just sits, completely exhausted, Alma is already running back and forth across the room as if nothing happened. Sanya stands looking completely lost, and Alma tries to figure out how to even explain this crazy situation he is in. He thought what is, and they both just lean back for a moment with cups of hot tea. Sanya looks completely drained after training, so Alma soothingly says there's no point in rushing if it didn't work the first time because although Luna has a natural talent for magic, when learning to control energy, it's better not to rush. He remembers his training from a previous life. It took him a whole month to grasp the essence, so he He asks her to just calm down. She lowers her eyes and quietly says she understands him. But Sanya is not going to give up suddenly. He throws all his strength into one more attempt, and Alma stands aside watching. She is collapsing but raises her eyes in complete shock and asks if she really just managed to pull off this trick. Alma's eyes widened in surprise, although he was the one who showed her by example how to do it. He cannot believe it, she really learned to teleport so quickly. Sanya stands catching her breath, but she radiates such serious magic as if Luna touched her wise gift, and Alma knew that Luna would naturally handle it. But Sanya raises her head and asks if she just performed that trick with the box. She almost smiles and says that if she continues to practice, she will soon become a pro at it. So she takes a sip of tea, just nods and looks completely satisfied with how everything is going. Looking at her, Alma suddenly realizes she loves magic simply for its own sake. He involuntarily thinks that Luna is learning extraordinarily fast for her age and is probably the best student he has ever had, but Sanya says she does not want to hear that from a genius like him at all. She begins to explain that she had actually been studying magic deeply for a long time, long before she officially received her gift. It turned out her great-grandfather was a legendary magician in the kingdom, so their house was always bursting with books about magic. Since childhood, she has simply been obsessed with learning new spells, and Alma sees her passion for this has not faded at all when they finish the break. Eric begins to tell Alma about their history, recalling how their family once lived in the royal capital, but it turned out that the father simply lost patience with the endless dramas and fights among the nobles. To protect everyone, they moved to the lands from which their ancestors came, and it was quite clear that those noble quarrels were a real nightmare. Alma looks and understands that Luna and her family really went through a lot of struggle to get to this, but Eric says that the people who live here were amazing from the very beginning. They welcomed them with open arms. He tells how they sat and listened to the story of his father, and the locals even united to build them a decent house, because they believed that a lord should not live in a shack. Sanya raises her gaze, her face serious, and says that it is precisely because of this that she so resolutely strives to repay everyone in this territory. Alma just looks at her, she pauses for a moment, and then she gave him a truly warm smile and personally thanked him for all the help he had recently provided them. She knows that with the magic of the item box that he is teaching her, they will be able to do much more for people than ever before. Alma constantly turns over in her mind that Luna calls him unfair, but as soon as she sees Sanya's warm smile, it seems to him that Luna is the one who is unfair. Looking around the village, he thought, as soon as Luna learns the necessary magic, this territory will be in excellent condition. She is confident that she can handle anything that comes her way on her own, and he will not have to intervene. It is a somewhat lonely thought. He wonders if the lands would really be better off without him, and just then a sharp sound caught his ear. Sanya asks what happened, and Alma says anxiously that suddenly it became too noisy outside, so he asks what is going on just at the moment when Luna rushes up completely frightened and trying to explain the situation. From outside someone roared, "Eric, Lord of Flanders, you need to quietly come with us." Eric stands there in complete shock and not understanding anything, asks why this is happening at all, while a group of knights approaches closer and closer. The knight accuses him of using monsters for his own benefit, and Alma with the rest of the family froze in horror when the soldiers declared Eric a traitor to the kingdom and ordered him to immediately stand trial in the royal capital. 3 days have passed since the knights took Eric to the capital, leaving everyone in a state of to avoid drowning in waiting and guessing. Alma does not sit idly, she feeds the village animals to distract herself. Luna holds on with all her might, persuading herself and others that everything will be fine, despite the heavy, gloomy atmosphere in the village. She calls Alma to get his attention, and he reminds her that her father said he is going there only to explain the situation. He says that if he is innocent, he just needs to stay calm and stand his ground, and she agrees this is the only way. Clenching her face, they promise that they themselves would defend this territory until her father returns. Later, Alma and Luna spend time with Raul when Raul notices someone and says that he is finally back on his feet. Luna shouts his name, but Alma is fixated on the man's hand and asks what happened to cause such a terrible wound. And there stands a villager completely exhausted, with his hand wrapped in thick bandages. Other neighbors gather around and ask what happened to him, sensing that things will only get worse. The wounded man trembles, telling them that the kingdom's army attacked them in the forest. He is sure those soldiers are going to seize the entire territory while Erica is away. Raul tries to downplay it, telling Alma that she is probably just overreacting, but But Alma is not quite sure. He can't stop thinking about why the army intervened right now. He looked closely at the man's hand and noticed that the wound looks more like a claw tear than a sword cut, and his clothes are covered in some strange powder. The man begins to beg for help, shouting that his wife and child are still trapped in those woods. Alma does not hesitate for a moment and tells the man that he has already taken care of it. He tells everyone that they are going into the forest to check what is there and asks Sanya to look after that man while they are gone. When they go inside, Alma suddenly realizes that army was probably just an illusion. Raul is puzzled, but Alma explains that this monster uses a poisonous powder that makes people see what they fear the most. Alma understands that people here are probably going insane because they see false versions of the kingdom's army, and he cannot. He cannot help but wonder, why would someone lead their family into such a dangerous place? Raul suddenly shouts when they find two people completely wrapped in dense white cobwebs, hanging there as if they were caught by a predator, and Alma says they are completely unable to act while the group fusses, trying to decide what to do next. At that moment, out of nowhere, a whole group of armored soldiers with glowing eyes appears and immediately surrounds them. Raul begins to panic and, with fear in his voice, asks Alma, "Are you absolutely sure these guys are not real?" He trembles and can barely speak because he is terribly scared, especially when it comes to math. The giant wolf Fenrir appears right before them. Raul hoarsely utters her name, but she is almost calm, telling him that it is just another false image caused by their fear. Raul tries to find out if the wolf and the soldiers are just props, but almost rejects this idea and immediately says, no, because it turns out real monsters hide inside illusions and attack while their victims are distracted by fakes. Raul begins to get nervous and asks if they really have to fight an entire army, while Alma remains calm and says it seems so. He stands right there, serious, in a coat with a high collar like a real pro. Alma understands that the forest draws out people's fears and admits, this man is the last person he would ever want to see. Suddenly, Raul draws his sword and shouts that something is rushing straight at them. The giant wolf Fenrir jumps into the air with outstretched claws, and Raul tenses, preparing to take a direct hit. Alma just stands and watches as the wolf lunges forward, not even flinching before this huge beast, because he knows, no matter how plausible these illusions are, they still cannot truly use that person's ability. He pulls out a glowing magic orb, thinking that even if the monster can hide its true form, his magic of searching can still find them. He activates his search sense and unfolds a huge net above the trees. And then, at that very moment, he finds it a real monster is hiding right on the tree trunk. Alma did not waste a second and unleashed a huge barrage of advanced wind magic to clear the area, and when the dust begins to settle, Raul notices the illusion finally falls apart. Suddenly he seems to notice something and shouts to Raul, look up, because a dark shadow descends from the trees right above them, and it turned out to be a huge terrifying moth monster, which when it attacks lets out a loud roar. Raul shouted for Luna's help, but Alma was already acting, summoning jagged earth pillars to block the strike. Luna stands as if in a stupor, looking at him. She can't believe he uses the highest level magic so casually, as if joking. Raul thinks the fight is already over and says this should settle everything, but Alma sharply says he is mistaken. He turns to the frightened man holding his family and asks if 3 of them tried to escape the city. And the man just looks at him completely confused, asking what Alma even meant. You almost start to piece the puzzle together. These people chose a dangerous forest instead of the main road, and noticing hints about the kingdom's army, he understands they are probably running away from something. Then the man begins to speak. A rumor went around that the one who framed Eric was called the great sage Julius, and Alma immediately asked who he was at all. It turns out Julius is the strongest mage among familiars and essentially rules the whole country, a cold, ruthless prime minister who he destroys everyone who stands in his way. Recently, he even executed a lord just on suspicion and took over his lands in a matter of days. Sanya raises his eyes to his sister with a worried face, and the air around becomes increasingly heavy because the man continues. He explains that since Alma is a stranger, he can't even imagine how terrible Julius can be, and no one knows when the army might suddenly arrive. So the man admits he always thought that using monsters at work, as they do in these parts, is a bad idea. Suddenly someone shouted loudly that he is incredibly selfish, and Alma turned around to see who was shouting. And Luna, looking completely exhausted and irritated, exposes him for those words after they all barely escaped alive together. Luna approaches the man closely and asks if he really intends to dump all the hard work on Alma. Alma just watches as she explodes, and she does not calm down, shouts and asks if he forgot that her dad always says, faith in people means truly taking responsibility. Alma turns to Sanya with a smile and says thank you to her, but he actually feels great and does not stop there because he looked at the group and said that everything was fine because he knows that everyone is just very scared right now, and then he admits that all this mess is his fault. He did everything half seriously, but now he is ready to fix everything. Alma lowered his gaze with a stern face, said that he will prove to everyone what he is capable of, placed his hand on his heart and swore, if an army of the kingdom ever appears, he will not allow them to touch anyone even with a finger. Eric looks at the boy as if he is crazy and in a distrustful tone asks what he even intends to do after such words. And he adds, does Alma really think that he can stand alone against an entire army? Alma simply raises his eyes to the trees and says that he needs at least to gather enough military force so that everyone finally stops worrying. Alma looks completely confident and tells the group not to worry, he already has a plan, and he starts to walk away, waves his hand and says that he will be gone for a short time and asks to watch over everything, even if someone tries to call him back. Meanwhile, several influential people carefully examined the legendary items, the fertilizer of the god of harvest and magical crystals, and whispered that no ordinary lord should ever have such rare treasures. Edward says that some boy is involved here, apparently connected with the Empire, and they even found a relic of the demon race. He already considers it obvious, the lands of Flanders either sided with the Empire or made a suspicious deal with a powerful demon. But Julius asks him to calm down and not make hasty conclusions, and Edward simply agrees. Julius tapped on the table and inquired how Lord Eric, who leads to, has been doing lately. They say Eric just sits quietly in the cell and insists that he is innocent, while someone just whistles at this news. Julius looks into the distance, whispering Eric's name under his breath as if calculating his next move. He insists treat Eric with respect because he might turn out to be the perfect bait. The full moon hangs over the building and someone sighs, thinking that they are just being used like a pawn and a bishop. Inside, Luna is wrapped in a blanket and looks like she is sound asleep next to her teddy bear. But it turned out that this was just a cover because she is actually outside near the trees and looks very determined, like a SH. She sneaks through the forest under the moonlight, muffling her steps with all her might so that no one notices. Suddenly she runs into Raul and Sanya, who are waiting for her, and Raul asks what she is doing so late, forcing Luna. Luna completely loses control. She can't believe that Sanya and Raul caught her at the same time, and she stands there, racking her brains. How did they find out, since a minute ago she was still in bed? Sanya can't hold back and exposes her, says she knew long ago. Luna was just pretending to be asleep, and then she tells her sister that since she heard the name Julius, she has been acting very strangely, as if there are too many thoughts in her head. Sanya asked if she really intends to defeat Julius on her own, noting that Luna had always been too reckless, and Luna stood there completely silent. Suddenly Luna dashed into the forest, leaving Sanya standing there completely stunned, and Sanya shouts, asking why she is running away at all, while Raul just watches how it all happens. She constantly calls her sister to stop, but Luna is already going deeper into the forest, and Sanya looks completely tense, calls her sister again, shouting as she tries to keep up with her. But it doesn't last long. Luna falls face down on the ground, and Raul jokes that she has no endurance at all. Luna catches her breath and tells them that she actually met that boy only once, and she begins to recall the gift-giving ceremony in the Great Temple, remembering how everything changed when the title of Sage was announced before the huge crowd, and then this happened. This tall, creepy man in a mask appeared right in front of her. He looked her straight in the eyes and said, "My name is Julia." Luna stands completely bewildered, especially when suddenly a voice called her and named her a great wise woman. Julius leans closer and quietly tells her that even without words it is clear she has considerable talent. He looks her straight in the eyes and says for her to come work for him, promising to give her everything she desires. Luna looks at his outstretched hand and suddenly realizes only the road to the kingdom can save her father. She knows well her dad would not be happy with such liberation, but he will be safe, and that is the most important. With complete focus in her eyes, she resolutely told everyone, just do not stand in her way. Suddenly she releases a bolt of lightning straight into the ground. A huge explosion of light blinds everyone. Sanya struggles to see through the dazzling flash and shouts, "Raul," while dust rises all around. Raul, through the smoke with a sly smile, said he can track anyone just by their footsteps, even if he sees absolutely nothing. Luna froze completely by surprise, and Raul loudly warns her, "Do not underestimate how lightning fast the Night of the Wind can move." Luna lowers her gaze, a shadow covers her eyes, quietly apologizes to Drutskson and promises to help as soon as she returns, and meanwhile, the roof of the building suddenly collapses and completely catches Raul by surprise, while Luna simply walks away from this chaos. She rushes with all her might, and Sanya wonders, did she really arrange for that shaky roof to fall at that very moment? Raul understands that she is using the city map to her advantage, but he is a bit busy. Someone is stuck under a pile of firewood and is shouting for help. Luna is barely breathing, but she feels she is almost safe if only she manages to cross the territory boundary. Only Ma. The powerful spell Seed of the Heavenly Tree explodes and giant wooden pillars burst from the ground, completely blocking her path. Someone shouted that they finally cornered her, and Luna froze in place, seeing Sanya standing right there. Sanya looks noticeably upset about the whole situation and says to her sister, "Just be a good girl and sit still for once." She tries to calm everyone down, saying that the best thing they can do is just wait together until Alma appears. Sanya looks away and tells her to just talk to him, while Luna just stands there, completely confused and not knowing what to do next. Luna smiles softly, looking around and quietly thanking Alma for everything he has already done, but the moment suddenly breaks. She asks for help with the territory, and a strange light begins to glow from her body. Raul was stunned when he saw that she was really teleporting, even though Alma said she could only move a few inches at a time. He just looks at her with a nervous expression, mentally considering her a true genius for pulling off such a move right now. It becomes difficult. Raul looks around in the forest, complete darkness all around, and he has no idea how they are supposed to search here at all. Sanya stands, clearly irritated, and tells Raul that her sister always behaves like that, and says that as soon as an idea appears in her head, she instantly rushes somewhere, listens to no one, and almost always gets lost. She is clearly irritated because her sister insisted that Alma is the one they can really trust. And suddenly she just explodes, shouting at the top of her voice that her sister is a complete idiot. She shouts that she doesn't even care if her sister gets lost again, and Raul just stands and thinks how insanely loud her voice is. One of the officials finishes the conversation and says that he will handle everything and make sure that everything is ready. He looks down at the small object in his hand and asks once again what the boy's name was when SC. The man next to the scars pauses for a moment. He describes him as a guy who gave advice to the local lord and even delivered a few rare items, and Finally, she chooses a name, Alma Fells. Meanwhile, in the forest, Alma stands firm, clearly focused on. He is looking for someone and calls into the void. That person still skillfully hides their presence, and he admits that it took him until sunset to find that person. Suddenly, a huge wolf Fenrir appears and, as if with a smile, remarks how strange it is that this time it is the child who is hunting him. Alma did not blink an eye, immediately told the giant wolf that he actually came here because he needed to ask a big favor. He stands firmly right in front of the beast's jaws and calls Fenrir's name, receiving his F. Everyone's attention was fully fixed on him. With a stone-cold, completely serious expression, Alma tells the Lord of the Forest that he wants to fight him. Fenrir asks in surprise if he is really serious about the fight, but Alma simply says firmly, yes. Alma does not back down and directly tells the giant wolf that they should fight, and he really means that they need to go. Give everything, even suggesting that both put their lives on the line for this battle. Fenrir just looks at him and says that they have absolutely no reason to do something like that. That's how it is. He admits that he owes that guy a favor, but thinks that dying in battle is too much, and besides, in the morning he is busy searching for his son, so he tries to dissuade Alma by saying that they can talk later. Alma becomes more serious and says that he does not have the luxury. Plays cautiously, and suddenly he explodes with a powerful attack that makes a giant hole right in. He crashes into the side of the mountain, rushes forward, and the stones around them are just beginning to F. Everything is falling apart. Fenrir asks what is happening, saying that Alma is not the type to do something like th. He is acting like a fool for no reason and insistently demands to know what is going on. Alma asks if he has heard the rumors that the kingdom caught Eric because the wolf lives so close to humans. Fenrir recalls rumors that the Lord conspired with monsters to stage a rebellion. And Alma, lowering his gaze, admits that he actually feels somewhat responsible for everything that happened. So Fenrir explains what he had to prove. Eric never wanted to rebel, he was Thinking about how to pull it off, he almost suggests that maybe giving the kingdom a rare young monster could turn out to be. Loyalty to the Lord Fenrir notices this and asks if it is about his son, and Alma just waves it off and calls it empty talk, asking if this is finally enough reason for them to start a fight. Suddenly Fenrir says that he is simply too old, and this completely catches Alma off guard. The giant wolf bares his teeth and growls sharply that he is already too old to just lie back and watch how dark Alma's heart has become. Everything changes instantly when Fenrir finally stops holding back and unleashes a powerful burst of energy. Alma's eyes widened when he realized that Fenrir had just dissolved into the air, only for a huge wolf to appear right behind his back. Fenrir is simply stunned. He was sure he had caught the boy by surprise, but Alma stands there completely unharmed, as if that attack hadn't touched him at all. The boy does not hesitate, immediately summons advanced wind magic, aiming to raise the level. To level the entire area with one colossal move, which he calls High Storm. When the wind dies down, Alma simply nods to himself and says, "Finally, I understand." He looks at Fenrir and asks if that was the same shadow escape technique he just saw. While he is poo. He pieces together the puzzle in his head. The wolf jumps from shadow to shadow, dodging. He almost scratched his chin, honestly admitting that he really thought with that last strike he had him. But it truly impressed Fenrir. He thinks that the boy's magic is on a completely different level. Fenrir realizes that in a direct magical fight with Alma he won't win, so he decides to turn things around a bit, telling the boy, no matter how much power he has, he is still just a wizard. The giant wolf shouts a move called Shadow Devourer, and suddenly these dark beast-like figures begin to crawl right out of the shadows. Alma watches as they appear and realizes that the shadows themselves turn into weapons. Numerous claws cut him from all sides. Alma stays alert, irritated that these attacks appear without any warning. He knows well if he gets too distracted by the shadow beast, real Fenrir is about to jump in and deliver the finishing blow exactly when he least expects it. Fenrir actually praises him, saying the guy is much more cautious than he initially thought, but Alma just remains calm. He notices that the main squad deliberately stays behind and feels that the wolf definitely. Alma explains that his reactive magical barrier is his own trick. He created it by combining detection and protection magic. It's very simple. It senses the approach of an attack, calculates the damage, and immediately erects a barrier strong enough to stop it. As long as it works, he doesn't have to fear that some sudden strike will catch him off guard. But the spell is so complex that it burns a huge amount of energy in him. He rushes through the shadows, knowing that he cannot hold this barrier forever. The shadow wolves attack again and again, and it becomes clear that Fenrir is actually better than him in almost all combat parameters. She just hasn't become aggressive yet, and if she continues to use her speed and numerical advantage to control the fight, she can just buy time until he is completely exhausted. Fenrir watches him intently. Alma suddenly realizes she can just overwhelm him with tactics and end this here and now. He feels that he needs to change the course of the battle, so he begins to create magic of physical enhancement, instantly boosting his physical strength and endurance to stay in the game. He is not finished yet, although he twists his agility and reaction speed to the maximum. Alma does not lose momentum, instantly makes a dodging burst so he can move faster. But he does not stop there. He rapidly increases his defense and endurance to become even stronger. In addition, he activates enhanced vision and the ability to sense presence. Fenrir looks at him, stunned that he can simultaneously cast so many spells. You notice that he stacks all his enhancements on top of each other just to close the gap between them. One of the shadow wolves lunges forward, jaws wide open, but Alma is ready for this. The pack attacks him from all sides, and he calmly stands in the very center of this chaos. He rushes through the air, as if dissolving, dodging claws by mere centimeters. His new speed makes him almost impossible to hit. Turning defense into counterattack, he swung a heavy kick that hit powerfully, and then he puts all his weight into the next strike, not letting up the pressure. Fenrir looks at him with a sharp, almost admiring gaze and says that it seems the time has come to get serious. He almost holds his position, looking at the huge wolf settled on the rocks opposite. He smirked slightly and said for her to stop holding back and finally show him her true strength. Alma keeps pressing, asking if this is really all she is capable of, and this makes Fenrir call him a true monster. Fenrir admits to herself that she didn't think he could really openly handle her army of shadows like this, but she raises her eyes to the sky and notices the time for what is about to happen next is simply perfect. Everything started shaking with a loud rumble, and Alma froze, not understanding what the hell was going on. He looks at the horizon and suddenly realizes the sun is finally beginning to peek over the edge, and then Fenrir simply smiles and tells him that from now on everything will change. Everything around was covered by furious dark energy when she loudly declared that he had stepped into her territory. Everything acquires an ancient legendary feeling, as if they stepped right into the old tales about Fenrir himself. Old legends whisper that when the world finally ends, Fenrir will swallow the sun and the moon whole. He seems to almost begin to clearly realize what this means for him right now. In other words, darkness is her element, and he stands right in the middle of it while Fenrir looks down from the top of the cliffs, just waiting for the right moment. Suddenly, these furious blasts of energy began to crash onto Alma's magical shields from all sides. And he looks completely stunned, as if he expected none of this. The strangest thing, there was not even the slightest hint or sign that the attack was about to happen. She actually just flashed through the shadows and struck him literally within one heartbeat. It is a guaranteed strike that no one can dodge, and it turns out that this is actually Fenrir's attack. She has a special skill to influence the environment, and when she howls, the shadow that covered the apocalypse completely takes over. Fenrir does not ease the pressure, whispering to Alma that it is completely pointless to even try to escape, and Alma realizes that she cannot just defend herself, so she begins charging light magic to illuminate the entire area with a huge flash, shouting for the light to spread and shine. Fenrir does not even flinch, only repeating that none of this will affect her. Suddenly, Alma is struck by a powerful blow that simply knocks him off his feet, and the blow was so strong that it threw him back. He is clearly barely keeping up. Seeing how fast she is rushing, he sharply changes tactics and resorts to advanced earth magic. He activates the move Volcanic Stone. Giant stone pillars burst from the ground, and when the dust settled, he realized the light did not aim to disperse the shadows, it simply showed where she would attack next. So he holds his position in a glowing shield while the entire forest floor around him is completely destroyed. Alma grits his teeth because the pressure of the battle begins to weigh on him. He is barely holding on while Fenrir tells him that all his efforts are in vain. Shadows begin to sneak around, and she explains that she can slip through the darkness at the very moment he tries to start an attack, doing it impu. He can't hit at all. She notices that his defense is weakening and asks if he is losing the ability to block her. So everything Alma decides to do it differently, gathers wind magic, and launches a move called air jump, bursting high into the sky to escape the shadows on the ground, but Fenrir just stands in the darkness and looks at him, mockingly calling him a fool for even trying. She asked if he really thought the shadows wouldn't be able to reach him even in the air because all the darkness is essentially her territory. She tells him that there is no escape at all, and warns him that she will not give him an easy death. She will tear him to pieces, limb by limb, until he tells her where her son is. Almost barely smiles and tells Fenrir that she has finally shown weakness, and he adds that someone as thoughtful as she had her own reason to stay silent. Alma says she would never have chased him so far if she wasn't completely sure she would win, but suddenly a huge light suddenly illuminated the place. Fenrir froze completely from the brightness. Alma simply calmly raises her gaze and says that he has his own reasons to want to finish this as soon as possible. Fenrir thinks that this is complete madness. The sun should have long set behind the peaks. She notices something moving high on the mountain top and suddenly begins to doubt what she sees. The light becomes brighter, revealing the true scale of the huge cliffs surrounding them. Suddenly, a giant eye opens in the rock. It is Gaku, a mountain mimic who blends with the terrain to ambush prey. Fenrir loses his head. The mountain turns out to be a giant creature, and he cannot get rid of the thought whether Alma planned all this from the very beginning. Fenrir finally realizes that Alma was pretending all along to lure her to this open place. She tries to break free and escape before it gets worse, but notices the shadows beginning to move. Alma stretches out her hand and tells her that the shadows are already descending from the sky and tightening the circle. There is no way out at all. He unleashed his sealing magic on her, and suddenly from nowhere huge heavy chains crashed down with a roar. Chains of silence tightly wrap around her body, and metal links even wrapped around her muzzle, completely pressing her to the ground. Fenrir is just lying down. They are completely broken, and she realizes with horror that she has completely lost this fight to some kid. She tells Alma that she knows losers really have no right to ask for a favor, but she begs him, if you have to take someone, take me, leave my son. The voice says that Alma is truly impressive. She managed to knock down the mountain guard. This is Fenrir's puppy, and he is happy because from the very beginning he knew that Alma is a real monster. Fenrir is confused by Alma's words and, not hiding his surprise, sharply asks him, "What do you really mean?" Alma simply turns and looks into the forest, where a huge crowd of beasts and monsters has gathered in the clearing. It turned out that all these different creatures had been hiding very close all along, and they really watched the whole battle because they represented all the monsters living in these mountains. Alma tells Fenrir that since she admitted defeat, the title of Guardian officially passed to him, and she is shocked by this. She wonders if this was his plan from the very beginning, but he only says that he knew she was the boss because her son told him so. The little puppy just sticks out his tongue and joyfully exclaims how cool the fight was. Fenrir does not understand why he went through so much trouble, telling him that she owes him and that she would have helped if he had just asked. Alma explains that otherwise forcing the rest of the forest monsters to obey him would have taken too much time, so he needed to make sure each of them saw him so that everyone would recognize him as the new boss of the area. Alma tirelessly explains his plan. Overthrowing the former guardian when she is at full strength is the fastest way to achieve results. Because by giving the kingdom a rare monster's offspring, he would prove his loyalty, and Fenrir would understand that he was just baiting her for a fight. She looks at him intently and sighs inwardly. She cannot figure this guy out at all. Suddenly, Alma fell to the ground and bowed deeply right in front of her. He looks at the dirt with a very serious face and tells Fenrir that he sincerely regrets everything. He admitted that he completely betrayed her trust to gain power and protect his land, even though he knew it would hurt her. He tells her that he is not even going to ask for forgiveness yet, but promises will definitely find a way to repay her for this someday. Alma just raises her eyes and asks her, please, not to panic for now. Fenrir just stands and looks at him, thinking about how strange this boy really is. She stands over him and finally asks, what are you even doing? How can you behave like this after everything that has happened? Alma is confused and asks what she means, but Fenrir simply explains that people with real power usually do not bow their heads so easily. She tells him that since he has already tried so hard to show off his strength, retreating now would be pointless. She looks at him with a satisfied expression. She says that she was right about him after all. Then she drops a bombshell telling Alma that from now on he is officially the new guardian of the mountain. Alma thanks her, feeling relieved. Finally everything is moving forward and they can finally start preparing properly for what is to come. The sun shines over the rocks and Fenrir speaks again, telling him that she actually has one request. Alma looks up again at the huge wolf, a barely noticeable curiosity in his voice. What kind of request could she possibly ask of him? And she just stands there tall and unyielding, asking him to give her a true name. The boy seems rooted to the spot, only repeating the word in response, as if he cannot believe his ears. Fenrir stands with her little puppy and explains that she wants him to choose a special name for both of them, and it really is. Fenrir does not calm down. She keeps explaining that she needs at least some proof that she is really his servant, just standing and telling him that this is her only wish. Eventually, Alma gives in and says that he will do it, but he warns her that he is actually quite bad at choosing names. It has already been 2 full days since Luna left the territory of Flanders, and so far there seems to be silence because everyone almost still hasn't returned from the forest. Raul is just wandering near the gates waiting and they are on guard, but so far there is no sign of an army or anyone approaching this area. Raul sighed deeply and Sanya sat right next to him, completely exhausted and tired from this endless waiting. Raul becomes very uncomfortable. He just wants Alma to appear already and everything to return to normal when finally a voice sounded nearby, apologizing for taking so long to return. Raul and Sanya both panic. Alma is hanging helplessly in the jaws of a giant wolf, and she stands as if nothing happened. Raul shouted, asking what the hell happened and if that wolf finally tore him apart, and Sanya just stood there in complete shock looking at Fenrir. Alma looks terrible hanging there eerily, but he tells Raul that he misunderstood everything and just needs to look. Because Raul and Sanya finally noticed the rest of the pack hiding in the trees, Raul could barely utter a word, just stood and looked at. Gazes are directed at the monsters, and Fenrir explains that these creatures actually gathered an army to get rid of their own mother and seize power in the forest. Raul panics even more, yells at the boy, and asks if he really managed to defeat the legendary Fenrir on his own. But Alma, still hanging upside down, simply says that it actually wasn't quite like that. Raul admits that that guy is a completely different level, although he froze for a moment and suddenly realized that he actually understood everything Fenrir and the other monsters were saying. Alma explains that since he gave the wolf a special title, their telepathic connection has become much stronger than before, and this is great. This is a big deal because in this world monsters almost never appear with a title just like that. It is a real rarity, and when And when this happens, these monsters turn out to be much stronger and smarter than all others of their kind. And it turns out that by using the magic of names and feeding the monster with enough power, a person can really grant a title whenever they want. Raul looked at the horned creature now called Boa the Wise Monster and realized that both it and the wolf looked completely different. And this is a huge deal. The boa itself is now strong enough to compete with a B-rank adventurer, and everyone is completely shocked by this. Alma looks completely exhausted. He admits that giving special titles to every monster in the forest turned out to be much harder than he had imagined. Raul froze in amazement. Alma really went for it. He thought that even a child with such powerful mana would sooner or later get exhausted. But Alma just raises her eyes and casually confirms that he did it for all 30,000 monsters living in this area. He says that now there is a whole army of monsters here from very small to huge ready to defend this land. Moreover, these titles allow checking their status from everywhere trouble can be noticed from afar. Alma is still a bit worried whether the locals will be frightened by the very thought that after everything that happened, they will have to rely on monsters for safety. Raul tells him not to worry because right now this is really the least of their problems, especially when local farmers and villagers are already standing nearby. Their faces are rough. They are tired and exhausted from continuous struggle. Raul stands there with his gear, and Alma runs through in his head everything that Sanya and Eric recently said. He really begins to understand what it means to take responsibility. The locals do not retreat either, and one of them steps forward, saying he will fight side by side with them. Everyone without hesitation promises to hold the outpost before the kingdom's army, until Eric returns to the territory. Raul just laughs and says that it is all because of how hard Sanya worked, and it completely caught her by surprise. Fenrir scans the surroundings and says that this place is really a fairly reliable possession, and Alma fully agrees with him. But as soon as the villagers notice that the legendary Fenrir is standing right here, they instantly lose their heads. They all stood as if they had seen a ghost and could not understand how a huge monster is just hanging out with them. Fenrir simply waved off to get back to work, and at that moment everyone. Alma looks serious and says that since he is soon leaving for the capital, he needs Fernit to take charge and watch over the entire estate while he is away. Fenrir quickly nods and says he perfectly understood the orders. This giant is officially called Fernit the Great Wolf from the Fenrir lineage. The little puppy is not going to stay aside. He waves his paw and says he understands too. Alma paused for a moment, recalling how long it had been since he was completely out of mana. He sits completely exhausted and suddenly realizes he hasn't even checked his stats. Looking at the screen, he felt all the knowledge from his past life returning to him. He knew these numbers by heart. But when he looked closer, something appeared before his eyes that made no sense at all. Although all his insanely high stats transferred, his level remained stuck at the first. He begins to wonder if levels are just a way to measure how much someone's abilities have grown. Those who have transformed usually leave behind all the skills and knowledge acquired in adult life. Alma begins to suspect that his level and progress did not transfer along with the other abilities. He stares at his hand, trying to comprehend the strange situation, but, to be honest, he thinks that for now he has enough strength, so becoming even stronger is unnecessary. And yet this thought does not let him go. He cannot help but wonder if there is still room for him to grow. Moving toward the capital of the kingdom Familia, a giant army was already lined up in the castle courtyard, ready for battle. Someone looked at the huge crowd and said with admiration how magnificent the whole scene was. Another agreed but noted that bringing so many troops just to rule a tiny territory was overkill. General Achilles stands there with a stern look while the conversation continues. The Prime Minister just smiles smugly, as if the general's concern is merely a witty joke. He explains that most of those people are just porters brought to carry back the looted money and prisoners from the land they intend to conquer. The soldiers stood ready upon hearing that even an army of thousands could be sent to capture the territory. The premier simply smiles and says that he has enough strength to handle all the battles on his own. General Achilles looks with a scarred face and thinks, maybe this is just a bluff. After all, this is the very one whom everyone calls the god of war. He commands the entire kingdom's army. He just has a crazy reputation. Not long ago, he single-handedly destroyed the defense of an entire territory. And although he is so strong, there are a lot of bad rumors about him. The premier finished reading Lord Julius's orders and threw out, "Go deal with the lands of Flanders." Achilles laughed in response and told the premier that he has a great sense of humor, but he himself remains focused. Because the premier is sure, no matter what the road is, the end will be the same. Turning away with a self-satisfied smile, he said that the plans are ready and the troops are already ready to move. Achilles gives the Prime Minister a message for him to pass to the bureaucrat Mage, shut up and just kill the Lord faster. Claiming that as soon as he does this, they will show everyone how to destroy Flanders in a couple of days, he finished by calling that man old, but at that very moment, something heavy hit the outer wall, a huge crack spread over the stone like a spiderweb. And the light from the impact envelops everything around, and the soldiers below can only watch. The premier is completely confused, and Achilles cannot believe his eyes when he realizes that the outer wall is really cracking. The stone gave way with a loud rumble, leaving a huge hole right in the very heart of their defense. The premier peers into the smoke, straining to see who is there, and asks, "Who is it?" Out of the dust and debris came a girl, completely calm, and said that her name was Luna. She relentlessly walks through the ruins, introducing herself precisely as Luna from the domain of Flanders. Before she could finish telling them, she came there to see the great wise Julius. Achilles just stands as if all his strength has drained from him, completely exhausted, and the premier looks around and asks where the girl has gone, but outside the guards are already stopping her, suspiciously asking if she even has a referral. Luna is a little confused, so the soldiers explain that you can't just get to the great sage like that, you need a prior appointment or a letter of recommendation, which can. Luna suddenly realizes that everything is wrong. She sincerely believed that they were interested in her, but the soldiers are just telling her that this is how it is here. She irritably mutters that with such fanatics it's nothing but trouble. She decides that it is time to change plans and strides forward through the debris. The soldiers panic and demand to know who she is, but she does not retreat and again says that she has business with the great sage Julius. She warns them to step back if they do not want to get hurt, and begins to create advanced wind magic, releasing a huge storm spell that tears everything around. Soldiers flew back, not even managing to finish speaking. The explosion covers the guards, and one of them shouts in despair as they are thrown back. And another looks around, completely bewildered, not understanding where the attack went. It simply vanished. Inside, Edward sits comfortably in a chair and laughs, calling Luna a rather lively uninvited guest, so he decides to check everything himself in. Luna looks stunned as her magic completely fades right before her eyes. Edward sharply orders her to be quiet, warning that even just observing she could be hit by a stray shot. And then he emerges in the middle of this chaos with a huge, terrifying smile on his face. Luna just looks at him, completely shocked by what is happening. Mainly because that guy just deflected a colossal magical attack with his bare hands. Edward sharply ordered the guards to step aside, and they instantly retreated without hesitation. Luna froze in place, started sweating, and realized, now this is a real fight. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The power emanating from this new guy is completely different. And Luna feels it immediately. She froze in place from the crazy presence he radiates. General Achilles steps forward, his face calm and composed. Luna trembles so much she can barely stand, realizing this guy's power is no less than Sage Julius's, maybe even greater. Achilles finally stops, looks at them, and with disappointment in his voice asks why there is only a girl and a small child here. He doesn't even think they are worth his time, so he says he will let them go if they leave immediately. Luna froze in shock. She recognized General Achilles, and he grumbles that he lost the chance to vent a little. She froze, stunned, torn between fear and the thought, does she really feel relief that he is not attacking? One of the guards tries to speak up, reminding the general that even if it's a child, she was the one who broke the castle walls. And Achilles simply tells the guards to handle it themselves. He has no intention of bothering women and children. General Achilles looks quite irritated as he explains that due to personal reasons he is in a terrible mood. They were warned that if he really goes all out in the attack, he will eventually smash everything around, but Almi doesn't care. He has already decided no matter how strong this man is, it won't stop him, and Luna adds, she needs to see the great sage Julius. Because she needs to save her father, so she steps forward and firmly demands that he let them pass. Instantly released a fireball that caused a huge explosion right in front of the general. Achilles just sighs, complaining that everyone constantly talks about Julius, and when the smoke finally clears, he casually notes that keeping distance during casting is a smart move, you see. He looks completely unharmed, admitting that she hasn't even touched him yet, but he is impressed that she can fight someone with unknown powers. Luna does not retreat at all. Immediately after the last attack, she launches advanced wind magic. This actually provokes a reaction from Achilles. He is curious that some novice treats him like a real enemy. A serious expression appears on Achilles' face and he says, if they want to play like that, so be it. In a moment he rushes so fast that he remains a blurred shadow, and fragments fly everywhere from the unstoppable force. It triggered a huge shockwave that made Luna duck to avoid being blown away. Achilles is completely relaxed, calmly noting that seeing someone teleport is actually quite rare. Luna completely loses her head, not believing that he could cause so much damage with just one throw of a stone. After all, he pierced through her advanced magic and still had the strength to demolish the stone wall behind her. She hadn't even managed to realize this when a hail of stones, like cannonballs, crashed down on her. They tear the ground from under her feet and force her to dodge sideways, whistling past her head. She looked at him and suddenly understood. He is on a completely different level than anyone she has ever fought. Especially because she notices, he reads her eyes to guess her next move, and with each shot his accuracy only improves. Luna does not hold back. She summons her water magic and creates a huge, advancing water shield. They completely surrounded her, and she unleashed a giant waterfall on Achilles. Luna is confident no one can punch through water, so she will simply sweep him away. But she is completely wrong. She loses her head when she sees how a whole column of water moves aside as if it's nothing. Achilles just smiles like a maniac while he bursts through her magic with such force that it stunned her. She realizes that he didn't even touch the water. He pushed the entire spell back with just a gust of wind. And the water crashes against the castle wall with a deafening roar, leaving everything around completely destroyed. Meanwhile, Achilles just stands there and smiles smugly. He clearly likes how things are going. He quickly looks around and asks if she really thinks she can just hide behind the castle walls. He notes that her teleportation is indeed impressive for a girl her age, but he does not back down. Achilles looms over Luna and tells her to look back. The exit is right behind her, so go already, faster. But Eric froze in shock, staring intently at the castle walls and seeing how much damage has already been done to the building, and Achilles begins to wonder if this is some kind of gift to enhance the body, but quickly realizes an ordinary gift wouldn't give someone such insane power. Thinking that they might be using magic to enhance their speed and the stones they throw, he assumes that with direct attack magic they are probably not very good. They never used it, and Luna spoke up and said that she actually didn't run away, which made Achilles turn around and ask what nonsense she was talking about. She smiled nervously at him a little and said that she actually wanted to come here. Under Achilles' feet, the ground suddenly gives way, unexpectedly buckling him, and he begins to fall. He doesn't even have time to understand what is happening. A confused sound escapes him, and his eyes open wide. And one of the soldiers shouts, "Lord Achilles," and Eric watches how it all unfolds with a worried look. And suddenly a huge piece of stone wall collapses and raises a huge cloud of dust. Achilles admits that he actually swapped the place where they were standing with the castle gate. These massive steel doors are practically indestructible unless truly powerful high-level attacking magic shakes them. He looks at her with a smug smile and asks if her power can move things other than herself, and Luna just stands there completely stunned, and the dust from the collapse begins to slowly disperse. Leaning right in front of her face, Achilles demands once again, "Where is Julius hiding?" He does not take his eyes off her, repeatedly asking where Julius is, and she looks away. Impressive, she is still so young, yet already uses such advanced magic. He says further, she is probably lucky she received a truly powerful gift, but it's X. His face darkened, and he coldly told her that she is exactly the person he cannot stand. Luna looks him straight in the eyes and finally finds her voice to ask why he is so obsessed with searching for Julius. Luna looks him in the eyes and says she wants to make a deal. She will follow him if he agrees to free her father. And again, Achilles asked confusedly, does she really mean her father, the ruler of the territory Flanders? Eric. Piercing look appears in his eyes as he repeats the name Flanders to himself. Suddenly realizing that this is why the squad's dispatch was postponed, he began grumbling about some vile scum trying to expand their power. Luna just stands puzzled, but suddenly it dawns on her, if that's the case then actually everything is much worse than it seems. Achilles looks like he is about to explode, muttering that what is happening is impossible because not the slightest trace of magic. He begins to lose his mind, looking completely out of sorts when he told himself that if he just got rid of this mysterious, uninvited guest right now, then everything will finally return to its place as it should be. Meanwhile, Luna was caught completely shocked, not believing that someone could really break through solid steel doors with just their bare hands. Achilles looks very tense. It is clear that the one called the God of War is clearly feeling the pressure, and it turns out that his hidden power is the gift of a berserker. He begins to clutch his body as if The truth about his power comes out. He actually cannot shoot magic like everyone else, so instead he transforms all that inner magic into pure physical energy. Growing up, everyone despised him and called him a complete failure because he couldn't cast spells, but in the end, he became a legend. With his combat skills. He earned the title of God of War, relying only on brute strength. At that moment, he anxiously looks around and thinks whether it is already too late to stop what is happening. Luna realizes that everything is rapidly going wrong and urges herself. She must immediately retreat and put distance between them. He jumps back as the floor shatters into pieces from the impact. Achilles is not impressed at all, just grumbling that resorting to teleportation again is rather unoriginal. Luna just stands there, stunned by how lightning fast he moves. The knights watching the fight completely lose their heads. One says he just disappeared, another is shocked that Lord Achilles can even teleport, but in reality, everything is much crazier. There is no magic here, he just jumps so fast that the human eye can't keep up, and he crashes down with a roar and delivers a massive blow directly to Luna. She is pressed to the ground and looks up while the air around him literally explodes from the force of movement. Luna panics. She knows she is in trouble. She wonders whether to dodge or teleport away, but realizes she simply won't make it in time. At the very moment the blow was about to hit, something intercepts the attack and sends a shockwave into the air that shatters the ground, and suddenly it stops Achilles. He literally freezes in place, completely unprepared, his eyes wide open as he tries to comprehend what just happened. A mysterious figure in a black cloak towers amid the chaos. Achilles is thrown back through the debris, and the knights only stand frozen in awe, looking at the one who just saved her. Luna lifts her head from the floor, slowly beginning to realize who exactly came to her aid. Achilles is clearly frightened after seeing his opponent, and Julius just stands there in a mask, completely calm despite the fight. Achilles finally declares aloud, the one who just appeared is none other than the great sage Julius himself. Julius stands with his back to the chaos and reports that he just received a report from the messenger Edwards. It turned out that his guest caused a lot of trouble, and Achilles cannot believe that he calls her a guest. But Julius is not fooled and directly tells Achilles that most of this destruction looks like he lost control and was rampaging, destroying everything in his path. Glancing at the huge hole in the stone, Julius says he will simply pay for all repairs and damages out of his own pocket. He tells the stunned knights that he will also take care of the paperwork. He will just mark the entire battle as an accident during training. And he even offers medical assistance, saying that if any of the soldiers are wounded or very distressed, they should come later to be examined and treated. He glances at the general and asks if there is anything else that needs to be settled before they finish. Achilles barely smiled and said, "No, that's all," and at that moment the soldiers began gathering their things. The entire army marches off in straight, flawless rows, leaving the courtyard empty like a loop. Luna raises her eyes to her savior. Julius quietly whispers her name. Julius suggested going to a more private place and moving the conversation directly to his room. When they finally settled in, he asks if her main goal is to free Eric and bring him back to lead the Flanders territory again, and Luna answers without hesitation that this is exactly what she wants. Although Julius just leaned back and thought for a second, leaving Luna standing and feeling the pressure. She looks at the man opposite her, suddenly remembering that this is the great sage Julius himself, and she begins to worry about how she will serve him. He is the strongest mage in the kingdom and known as a completely ruthless prime minister, so she cannot help but imagine what crazy deeds such a guy would make her do. Despite the fear, she tightly grabbed her dress and whispered to herself that she would save her father, and she is ready for anything, even to get her hands dirty, for it to happen. The silence was broken by Julius when he suddenly asked, "Do you really think I am some kind of demon?" Luna almost jumped out of her skin when she realized she had spoken those thoughts aloud, but Julius just waved it off and ordered her to stop making such a scary face. After all, this deal is beneficial to her too. Julius looks Luna straight in the eyes and reminds her of what he said earlier. He is really not interested in her as a person, but it is precisely her hidden talents that he truly needs. He looks at her from under the mask, forcing. He made Luna raise her eyes to him in complete surprise. She asks why he even needs something like that. So Julius leans closer, his voice firm. He begins to clearly explain his goal and tells her that. Luna's eyes open wide. She freezes completely, barely able to make a sound upon hearing his demand. Nearby, a man starts sweating, loses his head, and asks if he really just heard her say that. He quickly announced that the march of the troops to Flanders is cancelled. Lord Eric is released. Instead, a few advisors will be sent to oversee the affairs. Julius stands with Luna in the middle of a huge hall and clarifies, although this is part of the matter, it is not exactly what he meant. He pauses for a second, then remembers the boy and nods. Yes, everything is going according to plan. The scene ends with him hoarsely pronouncing her full name, Luna from the Flanders territory, standing there like a shadow. Julius shocked everyone by dropping a real bomb. He announced that he plans to take Luna as his wife, which leads to... Edward sweated, looked completely confused, and asked bewilderedly if Julius was really serious. Luna just stands in complete silence, eyes wide open, trying to comprehend what just happened. She barely utters the words, stammering about the wedding, not taking her eyes off the table in front of her. Moving on, Luna sharply told him, "Shut up," thinking what a pervert he is, and... Remembering Sanny's warning, she shouted that she is an adult and stated her height to prove it, but Julius does not back down again and again, repeating that he is only interested in her power and wants to take her under his control. Luna looks down and asks if that power is really worth threatening her father and their whole house. And she looks at him as if challenging, not understanding why he so desperately wants to obtain such power. Julius simply says that the ceremony is tomorrow and leaves Luna alone in her room, where she sits and sinks into her thoughts. Julius looks out the window at the dark sky and tells Luna that it is already late, so he will send someone to escort her to her room for the night because... Walking through the corridors, Luna suddenly realizes Julius is only using the marriage to take control of her magic. Luna walks with her head down, completely broken. Edward clearly sees that this news has deeply affected her. He looks at her and tells her to stop frowning, like that there might be a silver lining in all of this. Edward explains that although he understands her outrage over the forced marriage, it is actually a huge opportunity that most nobles would kill for, which leaves. He leaves Luna confused, relentlessly explaining that she will have more power than most nobles and full access to all the palace's luxurious baths. And the vast gardens dotted with flowers, but what really caught her attention was his mention of the royal library, full of rare magical books. The thought of all those magical volumes made Luna hesitate, and she begins to think that maybe being stuck here is not so bad after all. Edward adds one more thing: it's incredible that Julius is over 60 and still looks so good. Luna just bursts out and shouts that he can't be that old, but Edward confirms. Julius was already prime minister back when he was just starting out as an adventurer. Edward looks down with a serious expression, once again recalling what happened. When he asks Julius if something is wrong, Julius gazes out the window and says no, he is just thinking about why people need power at all. Edward admits that he also does not fully understand Julius's true goals, but an old moment emerges in his memory when Julius, gazing mesmerized at a painting, said something. Julius clenches the letter and Edward again recalls his words. He has a promise that must be fulfilled. Suddenly someone's voice cut through the corridors, shouting to another, "Don't mess with me." The boy tells Julius that the soldiers have long been ready to depart. He is furious. After all these delays, Julius cancels everything just to marry some young girl. The boy with the mark on his head moved right up to Julius's face and sharply asked if he had any idea how much trouble he was causing everyone else. Julius remained completely calm and assured him he is certain this is the right step for the future kingdom. The boy only snorted mockingly and said that from his place it just looks like the old man is finally losing his mind. Julius puts an end to it. The matter is settled. He tells everyone that the ceremony is today and there will be no changes. He extends his hand and offers an invitation, sincerely saying that he really wants them to be there at this great event. Luna just stands completely stressed, especially with Achilles collapsed on the floor right behind her. Achilles barely gets to his feet, trying to tell Julius that he didn't manage to finish what he was saying, but he just starts laughing to himself, mumbling that she is now completely alone, and Luna just froze. Dark energy bursts out of Achilles. He bends over in pain, and it seems that strange horn on his head might appear again. It turned out his berserker gift is a double-edged sword that makes all his magic get stuck inside his body. Julius looks around gloomily and says that such raw power definitely has insidious consequences. The boy's emotions are off the charts, so his inner magic completely goes out of control. Unlike everyone who naturally releases magic, Achilles is like a ticking bomb. He can't release a gram of that energy. It turns out all that magical power accumulating in a person starts to harm their nerves, and right now the god of war is officially going mad. Achilles stands there like a monster. He was mumbling that he really hears a voice in his own head. Luna and Lord Fellows watch what is happening in complete shock, a feeling that something is very wrong. Achilles finally loses control and tears his throat, screaming, demanding that everything just shatter to pieces. He rushes forward, shouts at Julius die, and calls him a pervert. Julius under the mask keeps calm and tells the boy that he misunderstood everything is not like that at all. Luna looks at them and realizes with horror that this is turning into a nightmare if Julius really rushes into a fight with the god of war face to face, then almost certainly one of them will end very badly. She reaches out her hand, grabs Julius's cloak and calls him by name, while wondering whether she should stop this at all. Achilles fell to the very bottom, bitterly thinking that he could have just married and gotten this territory if not for Flanders and Julius. He knows that he was once saved, but even with all his strength, it seems to him that everything is slipping away. In the heat of events, Julius spread his arms and shouted to everyone, "Do nothing." Behind that mask, he looks deathly serious. He is preparing to show a unique skill that no one expected. He clasps his hands together to launch powerful surrounding magic, and the entire atmosphere around instantly changes. A huge explosion or blade cuts through the air and catches Achilles by surprise. He stands in complete shock. A piercing scream tore through the air. Luna turned around and could not understand. Was it Achilles or someone else? Everything happens so fast that she barely keeps up with the chaos unfolding right before her eyes. Luna tries to comprehend what just happened, but suddenly notices a pitiful mood that is strangely familiar. She remembers relying on her own magic to lead everyone into the palace, but it seems their luck has just run out. Alma looks back at the chaos behind and says that the atmosphere here is becoming quite tense. Luna just stands in complete shock, shouting Alma's name as everything around begins to fall apart. But he remains calm, casually calling her so she doesn't panic and thinks only about how to survive. On the other side, Edward is already nearly losing his mind, not understanding how some invader got through the castle barriers or if they even teleport and just appear out of nowhere. He abruptly stops overthinking and decides that the how no longer matters. Alma locks his gaze on his target, making it clear, this guy is his prey and no one else's. He approaches and says to Luna with relief that he is glad she is okay, especially after hearing she was in serious trouble. Before they can catch their breath, Luna shouts his name again. A powerful shockwave or attack cuts through the air right in front of Alma's face. The force is so heavy that it literally breaks the ground beneath him, and he has to brace himself to withstand the blow. He freezes with wide-open eyes, looking at the destruction, and realizes that the power he is dealing with is a completely different level. Moon just stands all anxious, quietly whispering Alma, watching the fight. Finally, they found out who that child is. Almaphilus, the very one they whisper about, that he is a boy with serious connections to the Empire. People begin to realize that this is the same mysterious boy who gave Lord Eric an extremely rare item from Flanders, and that makes him He becomes even more of a target while Edward watches all this with a smug smile. The giant attacking him grows increasingly irritated no matter how much he hits. Alma doesn't even react. This is magic he has never encountered before. He makes several fake attacks to catch him off guard, but those don't work either. He starts to wonder if the barrier simply automatically deflects every strike. The attacker looks him straight in the eyes and asks a simple question. If the shield is so perfect, how can he even stand on the ground? Suddenly, that boy stops hitting with the shield and drives his fists straight into the floor. The ground explodes and scatters into. Caught Alma by surprise, he realizes there is no more support under his feet. The floor beneath him cracks and crumbles, but then the boy throws hard logic, telling him that if he blocks literally everything, he wouldn't even be able to breathe air. The attacker moves right up to Alma's face with a creepy smile and asks if his barrier just reacts to the force of moving objects. Alma looks quite concerned as that boy begins very slowly reaching his hand toward him, explaining that this is exactly why he is going to Ray. He reaches his hand through the shield like this, as if gently patting the old man on the back. He is sure that if he grabs it slowly enough, the barrier won't even notice that it needs to be stopped. The guy stands over the huge crater he made and looks down at Alma, still stuck in the pit, and suddenly he loses control, grabbing his hand and shouting that some crazy thing is happening to his body. Alma watches as this dude starts boiling with rage and realizes the shield's automatic counterattack just triggered and has already started working. But then Alma notices another figure and calls General Achilles. The attacker is completely frozen in surprise. Achilles stands calmly behind the mask and simply asks the giant if he has finally calmed down a bit. The attacker sharply cuts in. How can he stay calm when his hand is literally smoking right before his eyes? Achilles sharply reminds the guy that he was the one who started the fight first, and the attacker shouts back that anyone would have rushed at the intruder. Achilles remains calm and says that Alma is also his guest, and this only angers the giant more. he tells Achilles to stop acting like he won at rock, paper, scissors later, and finally he decides enough. He gets up and walks away, shouting that that's it, he's done and he doesn't care anymore. One of the knights is noticeably worried and asks Achilles if they can really just let that guy go like that. Achilles seems unmoved. He simply says that the plan to stop the deployment is now official, and the attacker retreats, grumbling irritably. The big guy admits to himself he can handle one monster but not two at once. The knight behind him is full of surprise. He doesn't understand which two monsters he is talking about. Then he looks at Alma and begins to piece it together. A gloomy atmosphere hung in the room when someone realized that Julius actually has two such insanely powerful ones on his side. The attacker clenches his still smoking hand and swears to take revenge for the wounds he received today. Meanwhile, everything calms down a bit. Achilles returns to Luna's group and first apologizes for all the crazy mess that just happened. The man in the mask officially introduced himself to everyone as Julius, but he is not just some nobleman throughout the kingdom, he is revered as the great sage. Alma was momentarily confused, but quickly pulled himself together and says that now he understands who he is dealing with. And suddenly it becomes clear to him this is the very legendary figure he has heard so much about recently in rumors. Julius wastes no time and directly asks what brought them all here at such an hour. Alma instantly falls to one knee, hastily apologizing for the unexpected visit before explaining that he is here to speak on behalf of the territory of Flanders, making it clear that, although they are ready to fight if it comes to that, they much prefer to just talk. He is honestly quite glad that the boy's family instilled manners in him. He remains polite even when everything is so tense. Julius just looks back with a slight skepticism in his voice, repeating that Alma is there to tell his version of events. Alma does not back down and firmly tells him the truth. The whole plot against Lord Eric is nothing but a series of false accusations. Alma keeps everything businesslike and calmly says that neither Lord Eric nor the villagers bear hostility toward the kingdom, and to prove the seriousness of their peaceful intentions, he brings a rare treasure that the village has guarded. Solemnly raising an exquisite sphere on a stand, he secretly admits to himself that he actually just grabbed it from his stash, and Julius didn't even look at it and immediately said that the gift was unnecessary, which leads to. This completely confuses Alma. Julius explains that although it is a nice gesture, the entire conflict has already been resolved by another agreement. He makes everyone freeze when he announces that Luna is actually marrying him. Alma's jaw simply drops. He cannot comprehend that they decided to marry so suddenly. Edward intervenes and energetically says, if Flanders joins the family of the highest official of the kingdom, the land and its lord will finally be safe and will no longer have problems. He even notes that Lord Eric has already been released from prison, and now he is treated like an honored guest. Eric sits alone, completely broken, and quietly whispers, Luna. Raul does not buy this and explodes with a scream. They are simply exchanging Eric's life for Luna's freedom. He shouts incessantly that this marriage should not even be legal, and everyone stands stunned by the sudden outburst of emotions. Julius waved off Raul's scream and calmly said that people sometimes think like that, and it is inevitable. They explained that political marriages for profit happen constantly, and insisted that these engagements are completely voluntary for everyone. He even added that the whole process takes place strictly according to the laws of the kingdom. He again turns his gaze to her and throws to Luna, isn't that true? Alma can only look at her, barely whispering her name, while he waits for an answer. Meanwhile, Luna just stands, tears gathering in her eyes. She looks completely broken. Finally, she finds her voice and addresses Alma and Raul. She thanked them for coming all the way here just for her. Deep in her heart, she whispers to herself that everything is fine with this, although she herself does not quite understand why she feels this way. She kept repeating to herself that if she marries the great sage, her father and everyone at home will finally be safe. Luna thinks about how the kingdom's help will finally allow her territory to expand, and although she has known Alma and Raul for only a few months. Alma's face is the only thought buzzing in her head right now. She tries to convince herself that if everyone else is happy, then everything is fine. She is okay because seeing their smiles is the only happiness she needs. Alma just looks at her, completely worried, while he whispers her name. Julius broke the silence and announced that the wedding will take place tomorrow. He told the group that they were invited as Luna's friends, and his people will prepare rooms for them. He looks at Luna and tells her that she must be terribly tired, advising her to go and rest a little while everything. Alma watches her go, and the weight of the situation finally sinks in for him. Later, Luna stands alone in a quiet room, mesmerized as she looks up at the huge wedding dress. For the last time, she convinced herself that others' happiness is the only thing that matters to her. Luna lies in the dark with a scarf on her head, completely exhausted. She can't stop thinking about everything and doesn't understand why she couldn't just pull herself together and say what needed to be said.